This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people's head would have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting a position on him. We'll never let the true facts come over to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Do you remember his name? You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now, these people are in very high positions there. Yes.
You tell this town ain't got no heart. You can't penetrate. The sunny side of the street is dark. You can't penetrate. Maybe that's 'cause it's midnight and the dark of the moon besides. Maybe the dark is from your eyes. 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 You know you got such dark eyes. Nothing shaking, don't shake that street. Used to be the heart of town. Don't tell me this town ain't got no heart. You just gotta poke around.
We've at least covered some of this stuff of like the acid test, the Grateful Dead moves to San Francisco just in time for the Summer of Love in 1967, and their home on the Ashbury becomes a central, chill pad for this whole hippie thing. That's the foundational story of the Grateful Dead. I think we can sort of move on to like some more tangential figures that can kind of flesh out. I mean, everybody kind of knows what they did. They became a jam band. They just, like, the 60s never ended for them. They just traveled around the country, like, distributing LSD everywhere and having jam band shows, and
jabbing all around, jam.
Yeah,
Dan. Political,
And, like, it's literally kind of been the same model from the early 70s to today. Like, with the exception of Jerry Garcia being dead, it's pretty much still that. So with that, I mean, I think the real thing is kind of, getting to this like critical question of, what was this all some kind of op or part of an op, or, was this part of like a larger cultural shift that was managed? And so I think we have to talk a little bit about one of the main people that did interlock with the Grateful Dead from time to time. Wasn't as direct an influence on them as Ken Kesey, but this guy was connected to Ken Kesey, and that is Timothy Leary. And he's, to call him a sus lord is like a real understatement. This guy went everywhere, did everything. He was one of the Johnny Appleseeds of proselytizing LSD and all kinds of goofy pseudo-spiritualist concepts in the late 60s. He coined the very McLuhan-esque phrase. Actually, it might have even been coined by McLuhan, but then Leary took it and ran with it, which is telling these angry young youths to turn on, tune in, and drop out at the height of the Vietnam War. So the way into this, I found a really interesting article by Walter H. Bauer, who was the author of Operation Mind Control, which I read a couple years back, and is one of the kind of the really solid foundational text of the study of MK Ultra and kind of speculating outward, like what was the actual extent of it. I think he published it in 1978, and I'd say overall, it goes kind of all over the place, and it's got all these different like interesting tangents, but kind of like Dave McGowan's Program to Kill. the overall weight of evidence contained in it is pretty staggering and paints a very different narrative than the one that we get taught about how the 60s went down. And one of the central cruxes in his book was evidence that he discovered about Timothy Leary and sort of undisclosed connections that he had to the CIA, both when he was a Harvard psychology professor who got kicked out for giving LSD to undergraduates and kind of very tiny embryonic acid test experiments, and then after he and Richard Alpert, aka Ram Dass, got fired, they were given a mansion by a member of the Mellon banking dynasty to set up the If Foundation, and basically for several years hung out in Millbrook, New York at the Dietrich estate, doing various LSD parties, and I mean really doing kind of what Ken Kesey was eventually going to do in 1965, but Tim Leary was really the kind of pioneer, and he had Allen Ginsberg and obviously Richard Alpert. I think Gordon Wasson was in and out of that mix. He also had a lot of Stanford connections, and I think Gordon Wasson was at one point the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. So he was rolling with some heavy hitters, doing this sort of gray area, maybe illegal, maybe unethical, highly experimental research. And I think even from there, you would have to say, okay, the odds are pretty high that whether the CIA was paying him directly or the Mellon family was serving as a conduit for CIA funds into mind control, that one way or another, he seemed to have the quiet blessing of the government. And he eventually, he got kind of booted out of that place. Weirdly enough, he... as this article I'm reading from notes, was arrested by G. Gordon Liddy in 1965 at the Millbrook estate and went to jail with a big smile on his face. And almost 20 years later, he was debating Liddy, who eventually was a Watergate burglar and a very sketchy character, on the college lecture circuit, receiving a minimum of $2,500 per appearance, still wearing that same smile. But he... After becoming this media figure, he did get arrested, I believe, in 1969 or 1970 in Orange County, California, where he was running with a sort of a hippie, sometimes described as a hippie mafia gang, kind of called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, that was producing orange sunshine acid.
That's a whole episode.
Exactly. That's a real tangent.
Potential CIA links to the Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
Yes, and for the record, one of the people,
Castle Bank or something.
Yeah. You're right. That actually does probably go straight back to Lombardi, as does probably the Mellon connections. I think it was Billy Mellon Hitchcock was the one, and his sister were the ones that Peggy Mellon Hitchcock. They were the ones that they were probably involved in kind of some sketchy banking things, maybe, related to Castle,
the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, according to, I guess I'm reading this off of Mind Control Black Assassins, but it is true. I just Googled it just to confirm, and I've seen this in slightly more mainstream sources than Mind Control Black Assassins, but one of the Brotherhood's major drug manufacturers and dealers was Ronald Hadley Stark of New York. The Brotherhood was controlled by Ronald Stark, whom an Italian high court concluded had been a CIA agent since 1960. The Brotherhood's funds were channeled through Castle Bank in the Bahamas, a known CIA proprietary.
Oh, okay, Ronald Stark. He's kind of he's in the web in this story. Yeah, he deserves, because he was probably a Gladio agent and probably CIA, and was this bizarre international man of mystery who was flying between Italy and Laguna Beach and got into this whole gang that Leary also showed up and started hanging out with, and they kind of worshipped him as kind of their guru, though one of the people, I did note it here, one of the members of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love definitely said that, Robert Stubby Tierney said in this Lords of Acid OC Weekly article. I think it's a book, too. We could go off that book when we do an episode. Stubby drops a bombshell of his own. Unbeknownst to me, he says, Timothy Leary worked for the CIA. He came to infiltrate our gang. So this was like, people were accusing Timothy Leary of kind of being in the CIA and trying to set people up. Now, he was arrested with a bunch of marijuana in 1970, and he got sent to, where else? The Vacaville, California Medical Facility, which as more evidence comes out, it definitely seems like it was the hotbed of MK Ultra mind control behavioral modification research on prisoners. Probably, certainly in the 1960s, 1970s, there are a lot of famous alumni of Vacaville, including Charles Manson, including Donald DeFreeze, a.k.a. Field Marshal Sin-Q, the leader of the Symbionese Liberation Army that kidnapped Patty Hearst. And there were a lot of credible information around that he was probably conditioned or something. Like, he was MK'd into becoming a Maoist insurgent, basically. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot there. And, of course, so in this article, like, Walter Bauer actually has a pretty personal line in. He interviewed Leary a couple times and corresponded with him. He had corresponded with him in, I think, the late 70s, and actually, not only is this weird, but in 1973, he was assigned to solitary confinement. So he got like sent to jail. He also fled to Algeria for a while and shacked up with Eldridge Cleaver, the Black Panther Party leader, who was a fugitive at the time. But then, Eldridge Cleaver became paranoid that he was working for the CIA, so he pieced out and lived in Switzerland with an arms dealer for a while, and then maybe went to Afghanistan, and then came back and I think got arrested. Also, he quote-unquote escaped from Vacaville prison in 1970, allegedly helped by Cuban intelligence agents and the Weather Underground. Which a lot of people question even that was either a thing to set up the Weather Underground and Leary was in on it. He did admit to being an FBI informant in the 1970s, I think, to rat on the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, the Black Panthers, and the Weather Underground. So he is a confirmed snitch, but the question is, was he CIA? So Walter Bauer is like trying to find out, and I guess he first wrote in 1978 when he was writing the book. He came across a CIA document with Leary's name on it. The CIA memo directed agents to contact Leary and company, who were then operating an organization called the International Federation for Internal Freedom, IF. The memo asked its agents to discover if any agency personnel were taking acid with this group. The CIA wanted to determine what IF really knew about what was then billed as the most powerful drug known to man, LSD, a drug which the agency was experimenting with in an attempt to create mind-controlled zombies. And another earlier similar CIA document I found ordered agents to contact Aldous Huxley for the same reasons, but he wasn't able to find more information about it, and Aldous Huxley did have a lot of links to MKUltra via the Esalen Institute, but he wrote back and forth with Leary. In July 1976, writing from prison, Leary flatly denied the government had contributed to his psychedelic research. He claimed that, quote, nobody ever went to jail because any testimony he might have given. Okay, well, now we know that's false. He explained that he had never used any form of behavior modification in his experiments, although a title of one of his papers had been How to Change Behavior. He told me I could find out whether his grants were CIA connected by writing NIMH and Harvard. He said, writing to me from jail, that if they were covertly CIA funded, he had no knowledge of it. All right, so he's already hedging. But anyways, like, he called the NIMH and Harvard, and they all had, like, quote, lost the records and didn't have it. But then something strange happened in 1977. Joanna Harcourt Smith Leary, I guess his wife at the time, and a coworker told me they had tried to contact Leary for several months when he was in Folsom and he could not be found. After normal attempts through prison authorities had failed to locate him, they took their case to the press and gathered a number of famous persons to sign a petition protesting the disappearance of the Pope of Dope. Joanna told me that after the outcry in the media grown loud, prison authorities quickly located Leary and allowed her to visit him. She said that when at last she sat across the prison table from him, separated by a pane of thick glass, he looked very pale. She said he had his head completely shaved, had bruises on his body, and didn't seem like the man she'd known before. Before he was released from prison, I wrote him to ask if he had been mistreated in prison or subjected to aversive therapy or any other form of behavior modification. Leary said that he had never been mistreated at Vacaville. He wrote the administration of Vacaville, quote, probably ranks with the most enlightened in the country. His, quote, enlightened facility was where horrendous experiments such as anectine therapy had been conducted on non-volunteer inmates under CIA covert guidance. This is important. And this ties right back to anectine stops the respiratory functions of the body, and the subject feels as if they are dying. An attendant must keep them breathing with a machine. As the panic sets in when the involuntary muscles quit, an attendant says, "This is what will happen to you if you break the law." And just before the subject loses consciousness, the respiratory is turned on and the subject is brought back from the brink of death. So in a way, making them Grateful Dead? Kind of like near death. This is that's some dark shit. I actually did not know that. But anyways,
good, grateful to having
not be dead,
been dead to be brought. But it's the same thing. Like I'm back, and I'm grateful.
And repeating that mantra to you, this is what happens if you break the law. And so in the following correspondence, I explained to Leary what I'd found, that the CIA was the world's largest consumer of Sandoz LSD, that they worked with the Bureau of Narcotics, the NIMH, LEAA, and other agencies to covertly give LSD to unwitting persons in, quote, real-life settings. Leary's answer to that was that he did not think the CIA experimentation with LSD was very ominous. His conclusion was, quote, based on my 15 years of confrontation on the front lines of the struggle, parentheses, individual freedom versus state control, are these. Government behavior mod programs were trivial, peripheral, more benign than evil, ineffective, silly, and never a part of any basic policy. Okay. He called me a, quote, prosecutor and said that he was disappointed that I saw corruption and conspiracy within our government. He railed about, quote, liberal paranoia, saying that it is 1,000 times more effective and pervasive than right-wing scientific efforts. He said that, quote, 99% of all psychologists are liberals. All prisons are networks of suspicion. There is no behavior mod conspiracy. Such rumors spread around among the liberal community are dangerous because they distract attention from the real problem, that the law enforcement establishment does not want to alter behavior. Ooh, okay. When I finally sat with Leary in Tucson years later, we renewed acquaintances. A couple of his old friends were at our house. We're glad to see him. Since I'd last seen him, almost 10 years before, his nose appeared to have been broken and his dentures no longer fit. All agreed, after he left, that this was not the same man we'd known before he'd gone to prison. We couldn't tell if he changed because of the normal prison brutality, or because he was under some great pressures, or had been tortured. In those days, nobody believed in mind control. Few knew of the clandestine experiments on U.S. citizens which were run against their will and without their knowledge. The first thought I had when seeing the altered Leary was, he's been the victim of one of the secret prison mind control programs. So they drank wine and chatted. Finally, he insisted that they go to a quiet place and make a tape-recorded interview. And he said he'd just finished Operation Mind Control, sent it to the publisher. It was too late to get anything new to it, and I told Tim, frankly, I was weary of the subject. But he insisted that we tape an interview. I'll tell you things I never told anyone before, he said. I couldn't resist such a journalistic temptation. He started by congratulating me for breaking the CIA mind control story. I couldn't take full credit for that, but I listened, accepting his compliments. And he said, quote, the game you're playing and the stakes at which you're gambling. You may be wrong 99 times, but if you're right once, you've won $1 billion or whatever you're playing for. So keep going. I certainly wasn't playing for the money. The stakes were higher. These stakes were no less than freedom of human thought and perhaps the remnants of democracy in the world. But maybe I was naive. Maybe I should write screenplays and make some money instead of running around the country researching the victims of CIA mind control experiments conducted in the streets of New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other cities, as well as in prisons, mental hospitals, and the ranks of the military services on unwitting and unvolunteering men, women, and children. Wow, I feel seen. I feel seen. I feel seen.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So Leary goes on and says, the contract I'm making with you is I never lie. I'm wrong a lot of the time, but I'm going to tell you everything you ask me. I'm not going to hide anything. On the other hand, there is no question that I want to ask you. On the other hand, I want to know things. So it was to be a quid pro quo then. I agreed to share with him any information I had on the CIA's involvement with drugs and mind control, but I told him, fact was everything I knew except the personal details of certain survivors had already been made public. So here we go. Here's the meat of this interview. Have you ever knowingly worked for the CIA? I asked. Leary says, if I were working for the CIA, I would have 10 people working, making a living exposing me. If I were the CIA, I'd own New Republic. I'd own the New Masses. I'd own Rolling Stone. I'd have 50 groups of people exposing the CIA. Do you think CIA people were involved in your group in the 60s, I asked? Without hesitating, Leary said, of course they were. I would say that 80% of my movements, 80% of the decisions I made were suggested to me by CIA people. I like the CIA, he said. The game they're playing is better than the FBI, better than the Saigon police, better than Franco's police, better than the Israeli police. They're 1,000 times better than the KGB. So it comes down to, who are you going to work for, the Yankees or the Dodgers? Leary had this in common with people I knew at the Mellon Bank. Baseball metaphors, heavy baseball metaphors, same as Nixon used. I'd heard Leary use them since I met him in 1965. I wondered if it was just a coincidence. Leary drank his wine and drifted a bit, talking about his current favorite subject, outer space. I brought the conversation back to the subject of mind control, telling Leary some of the details I learned about the CIA's use of drugs for 30 years and their attempt to find the perfect, quote, recruitment pill, aphrodisiac, and amnesia drug. I explained the magnitude of the story, and I told him that, based on my interviews with survivors of the experiments and psychoscientists who'd done some of them, I had to conclude that the CIA had long ago reached their goal of creating the perfect security device short of assassination, one which controlled the human mind. I told Leary that based on some of the documents I'd read, it seemed that he could have been just one of many scientists who'd been used without his knowledge by the CIA to conduct their mind control experiments. I've known this for 10 years, Leary said. You were witting of it? I asked in surprise. Of course, Leary said, leaning back in his chair with confidence. I couldn't believe my ears. The CIA had created the psychedelic 60s with Timothy Leary's help? You were wittingly used by the CIA, I asked again. During the 60s, you knew you were being used by the CIA. Wait, Leary said. When you say CIA, it's like saying N-word. But, he didn't say N-word. I knew...
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. I knew I was being used by the intelligence agents of this country. What were you doing for them, I asked. What the hell were you doing? Did they want you to turn the kids on, huh? Were they trying to make the kids see God and leave the Vietnam War alone? Walter, you are starting off into nationalism, Leary said, trying to put me on the defensive, exhibiting his fatal character flaw, sold on himself as a master psychologist, a master manipulator. I'm asking you, what was the CIA's motive? What were you used for? I said again. The CIA recognized what you probably haven't recognized yet, that I'm a very important national asset. What can I say? Leary said. That was Leary. He believed his own press releases. He lit his half-smoked joint and continued. Yeah, I saw in 1962 or 3 that there was a world struggle for the control of minds. That's a crude way to say it. I saw, after Hiroshima, there would never be a big world war. World war would be at the neurological level, not at the level of tanks and planes and bombs. I proceeded as an intelligence agent since 1962, understanding that the next war for control of this planet and beyond had to do with the control of consciousness, so I had to think very carefully about that. I wanted my side to win the war. There's no winning or losing, but I wanted my side to stake out enough territory. I'm talking about time territory, not space territory. Of course, you need enough space territory to get your time to make sure that the particular version of the territory of consciousness I would be represented in. I believed, after studying all the other versions, that my philosophy of the future, skip philosophy, my Clausewitz tactics and strategy, or my natural chauvinistic consciousness commitments were very fierce and strong. I wanted my species to be recognized, understood, and have a strong single voice in creating the reality of the future. I wanted to create a segment of the future which I felt I would be the spokesman for. I let him talk. When he paused to catch his thought, which had drifted away on a puff of muggles, I repeated the question, Did you ever wittingly work for the CIA? Yes, he answered strongly. I was a witting agent of the CIA, but I'm not a willing agent of Nixon. I did everything in my power to throw out Nixon. Parentheses, so it would appear, did the CIA. I'm a witting agent in that I think Roosevelt was a disaster, but historically necessary. So pin me down, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing for the CIA. What are you doing for the CIA? I said, disbelieving everything he said. I'm raising the intelligence of an elite, a very elite group of Americans, he said. So I think the future of freedom depends on a very small group of people who are smart enough to defend that liberty. So you work for the Central Intelligence Agency, I asked. Is it the deputy director of plans you work for? Who makes out your checks? It's none of your business to know how those things work. I'll answer you no questions that have to do with business. I'll answer you any question about history or people. He drifted off into a monologue talking about neurological cosmology, his outer space connections. Again, I brought the conversation back to the central question again. What year did you start working for the CIA? Well, I never worked in the sense that nobody ever came to me and said you would work for the CIA. Nobody recruited you, I asked. No, nobody ever recruited me. People came and advised me to do this or that. I didn't know that I was being advised by the CIA. I assume now that I was being advised by the CIA. But a moment ago, you did say you knew at the time. You said you were wittingly working for the CIA. Don't you understand, Leary barked? I'm talking about a very narrow segment of CIA activity which has to do with personality assessment. The OSS was the forerunner of CIA mind stuff. OSS founded Howard Murray, who was the head of the OSS, started the personality research. McKinnon, who was OSS, started personality assessment research, so that all personality assessment in the 1950s was basically CIA initiated. And, he lists like 74 OSS staff members that developed personality assessment techniques that are still used to select employees of the CIA and other intelligence agencies. Good grief, I said. I knew they supported Dr. Ryan's ESP experiments at Duke University. I didn't know that, Leary said, but I think they should have. And finally, the wine began to take effect, and the interview degenerated into speculation about CIA's activities in various LSD research projects. Leary was curious about several of them, and he asked me to see if I could dig up some information for him. Leary asked me about other LSD researchers of the early days. He wanted to know about Walter Pankey, and he was especially interested in the Czech psychiatrist Stanislav Grof, who he said had been brought from behind the Iron Curtain to the U.S. to run one of the only official LSD research projects. That's kind of interesting. Let me see. He did, and it looks like, Leary did a project at the Concord Reformatory, similar to very many CIA projects, and all the records have disappeared. I think there's one more. There's the connections to the Human Ecology Fund, you know what? Then he talks to a guy that he calls Yogi, who is his cellmate. And who doesn't like him anymore because he's a snitch. But it said he was very popular for a while because they thought he was like the acid king, like he was like this badass of the counterculture. But then they realized he's a fucking snitch. So after this interview, it was like all inconclusive. It was very bizarre. And he found a cellmate of Leary's. And he said that when Leary came back from his escape, which was like supposedly the Weather Underground, he was very frightened. Quote, Yogi says, in Vacaville, he had one of the best positions. He was working in the education wing. He was making it with a pretty little blonde nurse. He was writing and doing meditation, but he was running scared. He was scared behind the Panthers in there. The way the CIA got Tim out of Algeria was they told him Eldridge Cleaver wanted to kill him. That's why Tim left. This cellmate of Leary's wanted to be identified only as Yogi. He said that Leary had some, quote, heavy friends in prison who protected him. But he let everyone down. It's a well-known fact they took him out at night. The feds did. Before he was testifying, they had federal guards with him at all times. In the end, he was in protective custody. When he was in prison, no one knew he was a stool pigeon. He was a hero. He was living on his rep like he was the head boohoo of the acid freaks. That was enough to protect him by the heavy hippies who looked up to him. All of a sudden, they took Timmy out at night. Usually when you go somewhere, you go by bus, but the feds took him by car. They stayed with him at all times. That's when we began to suspect he was working with the feds. He was still chief boohoo to most in prison. But then the word came down he was testifying on Weathermen, and he even gave up his own lawyer and turned over the people who helped get him out of the country. He was giving out who was who in the groups, and they were doing smuggling, narcotics. He gave up all of that. They'd take him down to custody, and they talked to him. Obviously, they told him, if you want to get out of here, if you don't give us what you want to know, we're going to make sure that you die in prison. It was too much for him. I know they were coming regularly to make him turn over on his own daughter. He could have gone out in style. He could have helped a lot of people. Then everybody found out he was a fucking weak punk. I don't know anyone who really respects him. That's why I told him, the other night, there was a guy who came to do yoga classes. He says, that was a beautiful day. Ram Dass came and all of us was there. Tim didn't even have enough class to show up. He said that Ram Dass was a child molester, and he didn't even want to talk to him. So that's interesting. That's just like pin that for later. Ram Dass, who everyone's like, be here now or whatever the fuck. Tim Leary thought he was a child molester. Which honestly, reading some of these like stories about like, you know, orgies with like kids running around, like it's totally cool, man. Yeah. Anyways, so he gets the
a lot of the. I feel like Hakim Bey is another person who was like a child molester.
Temporary autonomous zone guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these people who are like get into like Eastern spirituality, like have some kind of like weird thing. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, some of the Burning Man people, but just to finish this here, like what Yogi said, like Yogi is asked, could Leary have been working with the CIA or FBI during the whole time he was in prison, before his escape and before he came back? He sure could, Yogi said. He had to be something, because a turnover like that, with the rep he had with all the beautiful people, I know he got a lot of good people, started on the spiritual path. He helped get a lot of people into meditation and yoga. He got a lot of good karma for that, but he's going to need it. He's a rat, and that's that. Let God take care of him. He had to do it the weak way. And I guess they think, this is the interesting quote here that'll come in handy. There's another guy who I guess was not his cellmate, but like in jail with him, a guy named Ray, spoke of the period when Tim could not be found by his wife Joanna. Or no, he was his cellmate. He said that one day Leary was returned to their cell with his head shaved and blue lines painted on it. Tim, quote, Ray says, Tim got just about the whole works. He was a different type of case than I was. They felt that they could use him a lot more than someone like me. I was an unknown, but if they could turn someone like Leary around and get him to do what he's doing right now, in fact, he'd be very useful to the government. The high priest had to be dethroned. Tim is a very fascinating person. There's only a handful of people who did what he did, who took a whole generation and turned him on. That was a challenge to the feds, if they could find out how his mind worked and use him. Well, one day he comes back to the cell with lines on his head. They were actually very precise measurement lines. His head was shaved, and it was marked with all these careful, precise blue lines. I asked him what the lines are for. He told me they were going to give him a lobotomy. They were going to stick ice picks in his brain. He told me it was going to be really great. They had him completely brainwashed. He said, quote, this is going to be the greatest thing. All my life I've been going through this. You get up, you get down, but now, he said, I'll be just as smart as I am, but I won't have to feel emotions anymore. Wow. You think they broke him? I asked. Ray said, totally controlled him. They gave him a lot of those fright drugs. They kept him in solitary. They did everything they could to break his mind, and they succeeded. Look at him now. Suddenly he tells me he worked for the CIA for years, I said. Well, that may be one of the defenses. In other words, by admitting what you did, nobody believes it and make you look ridiculous. When they're done with you, and I've been through a lot of their drugs and tortures, at a certain state, you're really like a zombie. You're so conditioned chemically that a guy isn't even aware of what's happened. Leary bought the whole thing. They have really gotten good at it. You know, nobody's going to believe us. Leary never would have gotten out of prison, Ray said. He'd either bend or they'd break him. No matter how sympathetic you may be, to really understand the situation, you have to go through it yourself. You say, well, they couldn't break me. I wouldn't do it. It just couldn't happen. But believe me, we are like just so much putty and clay, and we can just stand so much, and when they're finished with the mind control, it's almost impossible to tell. So that's kind of where it's left, but damn, you know, I mean, that's a testimony from somebody who I think was in Vacaville with Tim Leary, getting his head shaved, lines on his head, you know, and it really jumps out at me because I just rewatched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and like, I apologize, spoiler alert. I don't know. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, a while ago.
Yeah,
I think you
me too.
spoiled the movie though. It's pretty old.
It's fine, yeah, because I mean, it really that anecdote jumped out at me because it sounds almost exactly like what happens to Jack Nicholson's character at the end of the movie. He, you know, he pushes it too far one last time, and then, really because he violently attacks Nurse Ratched after the kid kills himself. And then, you know, he comes back and there's the, like, you know, truly kind of like heartbreaking scene where Chief like finally wants to escape with him and is like, I'm finally ready, you know, McMurphy, like, let's go, let's get out of here. And he looks at him and he's like, he's lobotomized. He's a zombie. He's gone, man. Like, they basically like almost worse than death. It would almost make you, well, I mean, actually, hold on. Think about it. What does Chief do in that final scene? What does he decide to do when he realizes what's happened to McMurphy? He smothers him because under the assumption, I think, that he would be more grateful to be dead. than to be lobotomized by society and turn into a zombie. So, yeah.
Fare you well, my honey. Fare you well, my only true one. All the birds that will sing are flown, except you alone. Gonna leave this broken Paris on my hands and my knees. I will roll, roll, roll. Make myself a bed by the waterside. In my time, I will roll, roll, roll. In a bed by the waterside, I will lay my head, listen to the river sing sweet songs to rock my soul. River gonna take me, sing me sweet and sleepy, sing me sweet and sleepy all the way back home.
So that might have happened to Tim Leary in the mid to late 70s. And
Yeah, maybe.
according to this guy, they could do it so good, it's almost impossible to tell once they put you through this process. And, you know, I mean, we could speculate all day about the Monarch Project and things like that, but this is definitely an environment where I think it's very easy to understand that, you know, if they were doing these experiments on prisoners, by definition in our system, are, you know, deprived of their rights. And, you know, I think... And maybe there's something about, you know, taking kids and doing this to them that seems too far out, you know, with a lot of people that hear those kind of, conspiracy speculation. But when it's coming from people who have been to these jails and you kind of... doesn't seem like they really have much of a reason to lie in this specific way. You know, it feels intuitively kind of true, and then what are the implications of that, and what are the implications, you know, for the Grateful Dead as a whole, you know, all of these guys, and the whole New Age movement, because, you know, we know that these guys went through some kind of MK Ultra experiment. I'm not saying that they were, you know, psychologically broken and brainwashed, but there are a couple stories where a couple of the other major hangers-on of the Grateful Dead ended up in psychiatric hospitals as young men, one of which who we mentioned
Barlow,
before. Like, what did you find anything like fleshing out what the hell happened with John Perry Barlow in college?
I don't know beyond that he, like, I guess had a psychological breakdown, and he tried to do a suicide attack. I first encountered that fact on Wikipedia when I was just looking him up, because again, like, you know, when I first heard about him, I was like, so what did he do in the band? Because it just doesn't seem to connect to me that, like, there could be a lyricist for the Grateful Dead of all things who wasn't even in the band. But yeah, so I was looking him up relative to that, and I came across it, and I kind of did a double take, because it's like, you know, you see attempted suicide attack, and you're like, oh, he had a failed suicide attempt. But then it's like, no, he tried to do like a suicide bombing like in the 60s. He was like,
when he was at Wesleyan College,
Yeah.
Where he was the student body president also.
He claimed that. Yeah. I don't like. No one really knows if that was actually true. But maybe he intended to sit on the lap of a statue and blow himself up. That was his idea. In Boston, he was going to do that. So he was the original Boston bomber.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that is like very, very bizarre. And also one thing that
apparently
jumps out,
he was on drugs at the time, I guess.
Well, of course, because
but,
wouldn't you know? If you had to guess, where did he get those drugs from? It turns out that he was a frequent visitor while he was at Wesleyan to
talk about
the
white
Millbrook
privilege,
estate.
like he almost did.
Yeah.
I guess also pre 9/11 privilege, but he almost did the Boston bombing, and like everyone at Wesleyan like came and like grabbed him before he did it, and like brought him to a sanatorium.
Yeah, well, exactly, and so he had been going to the Millbrook estate to visit Tim Leary and do LSD, like during college, which preceded him going on this like bizarre suicide mission, and then he was thrown in a psychiatric hospital afterwards. I don't know which one or for how long he was in there, but just kind of a bizarre, especially for a rich kid from Wyoming. I think,
not a normal event in everyone's late adolescence or early adulthood to like try to do a suicide bombing and then be slammed into a sanatorium. I mean, people have all sorts of experiences, like a failed suicide attempt. That can be kind of tragic. I wouldn't necessarily hold that against you, but doing so many drugs, do you try to, like, blow yourself up with a bomb?
Which also
Boston?
makes you,
like, that's...
It makes you wonder, like, what exactly was he participating in as a young college student at the Millbrook estate? Like, were they doing experiments? Were they trying to hypnotise people on LSD?
Type stuff.
It makes you think of the Unabomber, also in like a kind of a MK Ultra connected Northeastern elite school kind of somebody wedding off. But of course, John Perry Barlow,
he, I guess, facilitated the first connection between the Leary organization and the Grateful Dead. He was the one who's like, "What, you guys should meet in 1967."
Exactly, and then he becomes this guy who is just traipsing around the country doing this and that. I think if we haven't mentioned it yet, that he comes from a wealthy Mormon ranching like dynasty kind of family from Wyoming. He's the son of a state senator, Norman Barlow, and was like the grandson of a Mormon pioneer. They had a 22,000 acre ranch, and I guess he kind of had the pick of elite Eastern schools because there were so few applicants from Wyoming. Also, he was like a rich kid, and he went to this elite boarding school in Colorado where he became friends with Bob Weir. So that's kind of the thread of their Grateful Dead connection going way, way back. But then, he goes off to Wesleyan, then ends up hanging out with Tim Leary on the Millbrook estate, doing LSD, and then something happens to him where he has a psychotic break and wants to become a suicide bomber. And then he gets thrown in a mental hospital. And then afterwards, he, I guess, floats around. Wow, this is funny. In college, I see from this Reason article, he was talking about going to, he was always had girlfriends at Sarah Lawrence because Wesleyan was like an all men college at the time. So he says, I always tended to keep some kind of relationship going with the student at Sarah Lawrence, he writes, so I could attend Joseph Campbell's lecture every Monday morning. Okay, cool. And he said, a lapsed Mormon, Barlow missed religious faith. Campbell's studies of comparative religion and mythology attracted him. So did LSD. At a Vassar mixer, Barlow learned about a communal group in Millbrook, New York, headed by psychedelic guru Tim Leary and funded by Leary disciples who happened to be heirs to the Mellon fortune. Barlow visited Millbrook and thought it interesting, though he was put off by Leary himself. After some fast and furious research, he decided to take his first LSD dose back at Wesleyan. From then on, he writes, I was permanently rewired. At this point, Barlow's mutant propensity to live a mythological life really kicked in. He soon discovered that Weir was a member of a band. Aspiring to somehow get involved, he asked himself, what can I do for these guys to demonstrate my own mojo so I can be part of their thing? During the intermission at the first Grateful Dead show he attended, Barlow heard Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band for the first time. The next morning, he bought the album and took Weir, bandmate Phil Lesh, and their respective girlfriends to Millbrook to meet Leary. Jerry Garcia, Mountain Girl, his later wife, and the rest of the band came separately. The Dead and their entourage quizzed Leary, whose high church view of LSD was decidedly different from their hands-on, merry pranksterish approach, and they all listened to the epochal Beatles album together. After the record was over, Barlow writes, Tim Leary stood up and in this incredibly pretentious, sententious, mystical voice said, "My work is finished. Now it's out." Barlow was finished with Leary, or so he thought. Yeah, I guess that's all in the first 50 pages of John Perry Barlow's book.
One of the funny things that he wrote was this manifesto called The 25 Principles of Adult Behavior. John Perry Barlow wrote this in 1977.
Oh, yeah.
They are, be patient no matter what. Don't badmouth. Assign responsibility, not blame. Say nothing of another you wouldn't say to them. All right, fair enough. Never assume the motives of others are to them less noble than yours are to you. Also, a lot of these are fair enough. One thing he wrote was, avoid the pursuit of happiness. Seek to define your mission and pursue that. Which he, I guess, was one of his favorites, according to an article in Forbes called The Pursuit of Emptiness. Where I guess they talked to him about this, and he said that it was a way to challenge how one perceived their life, their job, and their goals in life, to not see achieving happiness as an obligation to oneself, to Jefferson, or to anyone else, or to God itself. I guess he wrote this article in Forbes, The Pursuit of Emptiness. So again, taking back to Thomas Jefferson as well. So
Well, and also, of course, the most obvious Jeffersonian thing he ever did was to write the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, which is an incredibly influential and kind of famous thing where he kind of, he introduced kind of the psyopy matrix idea of what the internet would be that it actually kind of never was, and he set up the narrative, kind of the mythology of the internet, and set himself up as a kind of Jeffersonian defender of the open lands. That the World Wide Web would be colonized by yeoman farmers and yeoman website farmers and angel cities and pages and things like that.
Yeah. It's very weird that he writes in Forbes, be happy, but remember that happiness is a gift you owe yourself, not an obligation you owe to Jefferson, the United States, or to God itself. I don't think I certainly don't think that, you're obligated to be happy by, or anyone would say that you're obligated to be happy by God. But I guess, the pursuit of happiness is a right, according to, that's the idea, that people are entitled to pursue it, not that they're obligated. I feel like that's a misreading, even of, I'm not, a staunch Constitution or Declaration of Independence defender, but I feel like that's a gross misreading. I'm not a big Jeffersonian freak or a big proponent of him, but I feel like he's not been given his due there.
His philosophy is kind of, if you didn't know he was from this strange kind of powerful Mormon ranching family in Wyoming, and then was really good friends with Dick Cheney, and I see here also I did not know this, but he actually it's so annoying. Looking, this is the type of person that I feel has there's another narrative going on in this entire person's life, but it is presented to us to be look how free and cool and groovy America is, where you can do all these things, where after instead of trying to blow up the statue of John Harvard in Harvard Yard, getting his life ruined or anything like that, he goes on to graduate, and then he talks his way out of the draft, gets accepted to Harvard Law School, sells his first novel based on a half-finished draft, and avoids either completing the novel or beginning law school by spending his advance on a trip to India, where he dates the Dalai Lama's sister. Andy Warhol makes an appearance. So does Dick Cheney. And, and then he's hanging out with the Grateful Dead and going out to this, he's connected with another CIA agent, the Dalai Lama, and somehow Andy Warhol, who maybe we'll get to him one day, kind of, I don't know.
I think we could get to him
Yeah.
one day. I mean, he was the Josh Harris thing, you know. There was always those analogies between him and Andy Warhol, you know, trying to recreate the factory.
Just another
but
merry prankster.
I wanted to bring up like another, the other like big lyricist of the Grateful Dead, Robert Hunter, because I found like a very interesting like email exchange that he had. It actually links in very well to what we were just talking about, because they actually the email exchange took place like in 1996 and into 1997, but they actually mention Timothy Leary's death in the email, you know, and like kind of eulogize him. And the whole thing is about their DMT experiences. For those who maybe, I feel like a lot of people will know, but Terence McKenna, like he's very famous as like the the sort of innovator of the stoned ape theory, which you've probably heard in like other permutations, even if it's not ascribed to Terence McKenna.
Absolutely.
The idea that like our in consciousness like comes from like taking mushrooms, like cavemen like took some mushrooms, like and that's how we became like conscious, and like we're all very harmonious, or like whatever. Like it's bullshit. Like it's complete bullshit that like no one in their right mind like takes seriously, and like there's all sorts of problems with it. He also propounded something called novelty theory, which he mentions in this email exchange, which I think is like kind of based on the idea. It really goes back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, like this sort of convergence of the past and future, the idea that like we're going to revert to in this kind of utopian
kind of
modern murder.
Didn't
McKenna these archaic
revival
practices.
Right? Wasn't archaic revival the term that McKenna liked to use for it?
Yeah, he might have. I don't know if he uses the term itself in this email, but I think that he did
in general,
call things an archaic revival. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he had a book. Archaic revival: speculations on psychedelic mushrooms, the Amazon, virtual reality, UFOs, evolution, shamanism, the rebirth of the goddess, and the end of history. Wow, a lot going on there.
Yeah, exactly. The end of history. Yeah, so he basically thought that like all of this stuff, like psychedelic drug use, like Grateful Dead type music, like that kind of culture, that was all like part of this like revival of what shamanism, like Neolithic shamanism, or whatever. But
big DMT booster. Yeah.
So this whole thing was all about DMT. Robert Hunter, who actually was like generally pretty taciturn, and didn't like talk too much publicly about like his artistic process or about drugs and stuff, wrote to Terence McKenna, and like this is a long thing that people should look into more extensively. It's called Orfeo, a dialogue between Robert Hunter and Terence McKenna. Has been published online under that name, and Orfeo spelled Orfeo. So he reached out to Terence McKenna, Robert Hunter, the guy who wrote some of the Grateful Dead's famous songs, like the Blues for a Law and whatnot, and Truckin' or whatever. So
I hate Truckin' is my least favorite Grateful Dead song, just for the record.
And this is the guy who was like, "How dare you, change my lyrics?" But anyway, so he wrote to Terence McKenna. He said, "Terence, in reading your books, I was struck by how closely your DMT experiments paralleled my own. I wasn't surprised by the confirmation, as you might guess. I considered myself a serious DMT explorer between 1967 and 1969. I stopped only because I was told to, in no uncertain terms, by the, capital B, boss of that place. 3 times, in fact, to my dismay. Disobedience was costly. I was informed that I'd been shown all that was mine to know, to use that and not try to extract more. I've written of the classes and varieties of DMT experience in a chapter of my journal, Memoirs, and will send it along at some point. The experiences were commanding and altered my grasp of reality. DMT invokes the various dimensions of its domain through pathways characterized by brisk rhythms." Robert Hunter. And Terence McKenna writes back, it's amazing that, like, this guy who's incredibly pretentious, like, and constantly is, like, punching above his weight and, like, it has met his match, and actually comes off as less pretentious than Robert Hunter. But anyway, so he says, "Greetings, Bob. I was interested in what you had to say about being an explorer of the DMT world until the management told you to stay away. I have heard several tales of psychonauts toking DMT and then seeming to break into a place where they were not only unwelcome but also unexpected." This is a hilarious anecdote. One person in particular, a composer, was literally thrown back to the beginning of time by an astonished and irritated Jabba the Hutt type who he surprised at its meditations. So some composer dude like took DMT and like he saw a vision of like a meditating like slug being
Jabba?
that then was that was like Jabba the Hutt, and then like he was disturbed like while he was like meditating. I guess it was like Jabba the Hutt, but like if there was a Jedi who was a Hutt, he was busy meditating, and this guy intruded upon him, and then he was like, be gone, and like flung him to like the beginning of time. So anyway, I have never been told that I am not welcome, but find that it is harder and harder to get up the raw courage necessary to make the trip. It is almost as though a secret hides in and behind the DMT state, and that secret is both real and so unexpected that it would leave nothing of reality intact. The secret cannot be told, of course, or I would have told it, but it is something like, here we go, we are all gods. Oh wow! What a secret! What a secret that you think that. I could have never guessed with the knowledge of gods.
Wow.
We are all omniscient, except for the fact that we are so damn stupid.
Oh,
all right,
okay,
yeah, I guess that's the last part I agree with. Anyway, it is interesting that you were carriers of that information. Think about it. It is kind of a hyperspatial muse. We become carriers of some force we don't understand, bearers of the logos, I would say. Others see us as the typhoid Marys of meme pathology. But left unanswered in all of this is the question why. Why does the alien presence intrude in DMT? Why does it appear as it does? Is that how it wishes to appear? Why? Etc., etc. I enjoy the idea of a slow-moving dialogue. I hope this can continue. So Robert Hunter wrote a long discursive response. I'm going to jump around because there's like a lot of it, but he wrote back like, my personal take on the secret of DMT. It was long, hard work making this world real. It was, and is, done for a purpose. To have others. To believe in them fully in order to experience love. It goes against common sense to try and see through it. Ignorance is the primary condition of Eden, but entropy is at work, and a world made for love is not satisfied by the transformational edict, eat and be eaten, but kills and does not eat. A sense of ultimate unity is lost, and the delusion of fundamental diversity breeds alienation. This is not Eden. Yet the monad does not face itself and subsume its creation. The failing would be eternal. Therefore, doors are opened and enough of the plot is, quote, made flesh to allow orientation regarding the surface gist of the matter. Collectivism is a wrong approach to nostalgia for the purity of the monad.
Oh, here we go.
Healthy diversity perpetuates the rationale of creation, such as it is. Healthy men, women, races, and nations evolving gladly to a recognition of the source, rejoining it in a gradual and rejoicing manner, bringing in the sheaves would be a better solution to the human aspect of this work, and is the substance of sacred ceremonial. My take could be way off base, but anything more Gnostic is off-putting. Phil Dick fell down that sink. He has an annoying, habit of, calling people, he calls Heidegger Marty, as if he were on a first name basis with him.
Maybe
they met.
He might have known these people. I mean, Philip K. Dick lived in Richmond around the same time that Owsley Stanley lived in Richmond and was producing LSD and had, a scary COINTELPRO thing that made him, kind of lose his mind. So they might have known each other, and even Heidegger, I think.
Maybe I admire your work in the Third Reich very much.
Hank Harrison knew Marcuse.
They talk a lot about phenomenology and Merleau-Ponty and Husserl. They talk about all those people in this exchange a lot. They're both big admirers of the phenomenologists. But he also says and Lovecraft. I wouldn't doubt, though he professed no belief in what he wrote. So he's kind of saying I could be wrong. It might be more of a Yelda-Boath situation. And that's what I think Lovecraft thought, even though he didn't say. So again, all these people love Lovecraft and they think it's so dope. But anyway, blah blah blah. Nobody ever got rich peddling DMT. Okay, so then he starts talking about one of our favorite DMT subjects. He says, DMT is self-selecting. It knows who it wants for whatever reason it wants them. It scares the bejesus out of anyone else. Those who ought to have it will find themselves in possession of it, like anything else. The human brain secretes it. In minuscule natural quantities, it's the fuel of fantasy, dreams, and visions. The alienness of the many realms of D&T is striking. This part, I kind of agree with what we've been said before. Like dreams and visions, like that's true. Like there is like a reality or an ontological reality, dreams and visions. But anyway, so he says the mechanical quote pixies, as you call them for starters. I call them the Klaxton men, with their click-clack box joints and their interdimensional warp and woof, though, quote, men they are not. Or the, quote, firemen, those beings of fire who inhabit one of the closer home stations on the way, quote, out. Firemen, beings of fire, Jin, anyway.
Tunnel to Hell. Wasn't that a Grateful... Wait, what's the Grateful Dead song about going to hell?
Bucket to Hell. Bucket to hell. Yeah, he was obsessed with hell. This guy was obsessed with hell, yeah. They seem entirely unconscious of us. The pixies know we're there. They're not much interested, though. And then there's those elemental forces, summoning elementals, Crowley, blah, blah, that descend on your room in a vortex and whirl all your property around your head, rattle your windows, even set your curtains on fire and leave your nerves jangled for days. Ah, the memories. And the critters, such as you pointed out, who wonder what the hell you're doing in their room. There's no time to explain, even if you could form words. And besides, who are you anyway? Anyone who has been surprised by heavy surf, whirled helplessly and slammed in the sand, has a reasonable metaphor for the power of DMT. Blah, 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 you wrestle, he complains about religionists with their guaranteed eventual paradise, of which they know nothing, taking it all on faith, can't be expected to understand or sympathize with those with a yen to storm the gate of heaven and see for themselves what all the praying's about. I'll stop with this, ill confident that I've moved slowly as I might be into the dialogue, but considering how much remains to be spoken, what with the eschaton and all, how slowly is it even possible to move? 23 Skidoo, Robert Hunter. He signed off 23 Skidoo. I guess number 23. But so I guess they're all expecting the eschaton to come soon. That was like, I think Terrence McKenna believed in 2012 type stuff.
Oh, no, he was a huge promoter of the 2012 thing, which was like, I think, a pretty thorough bastardization of like interpreting the Mayan calendar and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even S.K. Bain was skeptical of that, which really says a lot.
And I remember, like, because I moved to LA around that time, that ayahuasca, it was the first time I noticed ayahuasca as a thing that people were doing in kind of the, these groups and stuff like that. And that was it seemed like a common thing that was kind of woven in with that. I mean, obviously there's the South American connection, and then, we're going through like a dimensional shift and the higher frequency of consciousness. Like all that classic new agey stuff was just kind of like focused into, okay, 2012 is going to be this like breaking point. And then obviously it didn't happen. But the thing about Terrence McKenna that is funny is that his description of interactions with like the machine elves or the klaxons or whoever it is, not only does it sound
Robert Hunter's
like
the one who believes in the klaxons. He
that was Robert Hunter. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I see. So McKenna was more about machine elves and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but, I mean, honestly, it's almost interchange. I guess they believe they were totally on the same wavelength.
They're the same
as far as,
thing. Yeah.
So
like, I call them the klaxon men.
So then maybe it's interesting. There was an interview that popped up. Some people have have speculated that Terrence McKenna, much like a lot of these Grateful Dead people, had some kind of intelligence connection. And like, there's a little quote here from an interview where he's talking about being chased by Interpol after he was like traveling around Europe, studying like I don't know, just like shamanic and things like that. And in like the late 60s, he was in and out of Nepal and sending hash back to America. So he got caught. There's like weird movements around this time. Yeah, he was forced to move to avoid capture by Interpol. He wandered through Southeast Asia, viewing ruins, collected butterflies in Indonesia, worked as an English teacher in Tokyo. He then went back to Berkeley to continue studying biology, which he called his first love. Note he fled to avoid capture by Interpol, but then after a time he casually returns to Berkeley. Then, okay, so this is an interview. They're talking in general. They asked Terrence McKenna, I'm real curious about one thing. Why is it important for you to do this? I guess his whole, project about, entheogens. And he says, I wonder myself. You mean am I the alien ambassador, whether I like it or not? Well, often when asked this question, I've said it beats honest work. I mean, my brother is a PhD in 3 subjects and works in hard science, and yet I don't think it's brought him immense happiness. Not that he's despondent, but I was always kind of a slider, you know? Certainly when I reached La Chorrera in 1971, I had a price on my head by the FBI. I was running out of money. I was at the end of my rope. And then they recruited me and said, you know, with a mouth like yours, there's a place for you in our organization. And I've worked in deep background positions about which the less said, the better. And then about 15 years ago, they shifted me into public relations, and I've been there to the present. I think ideas get me high, and I like the feeling of understanding, and I love diversity to the point of weirdness. And, you know, they go on to say, it seems like there's more to it than that for you, because, you know, being tuned into ideas and being turned on ideas, but one thing, but you can just keep that to yourself. The sharing of it is something else. I think that's what we're getting at. And he says, you know, well, one thing is I'm really fascinated. I think of myself as a pretty savvy person and not easily led into false dogma. Okay, so the guy that's like the interacting with machine elves and talking about Robert Hunter, about the klaxons, you know, he's a pretty savvy person. And
Klaxtons?
Sorry, the klaxtons, you know. Oh, no, by the way, that was in a 1994 lecture at the Esalen Institute where he was a regular presence. So, like, you know, it's still not clear exactly, you know, what he was, but that's the point that I was getting at, is he's saying. So, like, I think even Terence McKenna's brother, Terence McKenna died in 2000. So, in these kind of allegations that have popped up in more recent years, his brother will go and, like, get into fights with people who try to say that Terence McKenna was CIA. And I guess, you know, the line on it, which is very similar to what people would say about Everyone in the Dead, is, like, when he says, I was recruited, and, you know, there's a place for you in our organization, and I've worked in deep background positions about which is less said the better, and about 15 years ago they shifted me into public relations. He's talking about the machine elves. He's not talking about the CIA. He's talking about the alien intelligence, like, that he connects with on DMT, obviously. And, you know, it's like you can just kind of sell it off as he's just being a little prankish and kind of saying, you know, I was recruited. I'm an agent. But, you know, you ask him, an agent of who? And he's like, the galactic intelligence, you know? And
right, yeah. And it's funny, like, at first when I read that thing when they say, like, the boss told me not to do it, I was like, oh, you know, like, your record executives, like, you know, like, told you, like, or, like, you know, someone, like, you know, some other handler told you, but no, he meant, like, Jabba the Hutt, like, a slug being told him, like, you know, stop it. But, you know, maybe those are the same thing. I don't know.
Who can tell?
Maybe,
Who can really tell?
Too strong of a distinction here. Yeah. He actually goes on to talk about that a little bit more. Like, in part 3 of this whole long exchange, he is talking about his you know, all this stuff, like, blah, 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 the great event, how he needs to be a shaman, et cetera, et cetera. You know, yeah, it's just very, like, but anyway, so he says, also another list that I am on, designed to explore the ramifications of novelty theory and the time wave, turned unexpectedly into a slugfest in which I had to defend my ideas, my reputation, the color of my eyes, and everything about me short of the number of digits in my postal address. I am now in the process, this is Terence McKenna, by the way, I am now in the process of rising above the fray, granted only by abandoning the fields of the shrill and intellectually constipated. But so what? Peace of mind is worth more to me than anything else. But enough about me, and back to the business at hand. I recently read, I kind of want to read this book that he recommends here. He says, I recently read a very interesting book that bears on our subject, and that I have been recommending to anyone who will listen. The book is called Cyber-Biological Studies of the Imaginal Content of the UFO Contact Experience. Whoa. A title which surely doomed it as a commercial publishing venture. Nevertheless, this book, by Dennis Stillings, a fellow resident of the Big Island, has as much to say about our subject. Ordinarily, I am loath to connect my beloved and always cheerful self-transforming elf machines to the popular and trailer court's notion that pygmy proctologists from distant star systems are running about making free and unscheduled house calls in the middle of the night. but Stilling's book is too rich to miss. So I love that he has the audacity to condescend to like people who like, you know, believe in grays. He's like, ugh, I don't want to associate the transforming elf machines with this nonsense about alien abduction, you know, like please.
Absolutely, bro, check yourself, man. Also, what is it with the anal probe thing being a sort of locus of mockery for UFO things in particular? It seems very sinister that the idea that you would have been anal probed or like, you know, sexually assaulted by a UFO.
Well, it is interesting.
Abductor.
I feel like this is a subject for another potential episode. But yeah, it is interesting that whole thing kind of started to gain prominence at the same time of the general, like, you know, panic around, like, you know, secret cults. Like abducting and abusing people, you know, in the same way.
Why is that such a sticking point of like, why do they react so aggressively toward, you know, anal probing?
Yeah, like, as if someone could ever be abducted and sexually abused by anything. Like,
yeah, that's the most easy, that's the most believable thing they could possibly do to you. I mean...
Well, yeah, I feel, you know, it's transference because they're like, you know, mentally trained to mock any kind of ritual abuse. So when the Greys do it, they have to mock it as well, even though they literally are getting their orders from Jabba the Hutt being, you know, but...
I mean, like, what if these guys were monarched? You know what I mean? I think we tend to think about... I mean, it wouldn't have been when they were, like, super, super young or anything like that, but, like, what if... I mean, when you have people that are taking so many psychedelic drugs to begin with, I feel like that lowers the bar of difficulty to find some way to manipulate that, and I don't know. I mean, like, look at what Charles Manson was kind of able to do, combining amphetamines and LSD and kind of, you know, cult like classic, just sort of like high control group techniques, you know, combining all those things. Like, these guys would really be like easy pickings to begin with. And
yeah,
it's just, I don't know, because I think a lot of the line on, like, say, Terence McKenna, this is a very new concept to me, actually. For some reason, I hadn't really entertained the idea of, like, what if these leading lights of the psychedelic movement, people like Ginsberg, Robert Hunter, I think the way that this conspiracy has been put out so far, and I feel like one of the biggest people to do it has been like Gnostic Media, Jan Irvin. I don't know if too many people have heard of that. That's where I first encountered this, but like, fair warning, I think there's like a lot. It's a lot. Like, listening to kind of his spin on that. He does a lot of good research, but then the kind of editorial insights about... There's like some weird reactionary stuff, some kind of like overly big focus on which like scientists were Jewish, and you know, things like that maybe aren't the best. But like his thing, which like he was very big. He published a lot of stuff that actually the thing I just read from was from Logos Media, and it was like his exposing Terence McKenna as a CIA agent and using that interview as evidence. For one, I think sometimes he reaches a little far, something that is kind of convincing but not absolutely like dispositive, that's like, okay, smoking gun, like he's an agent. He kind of takes it as that like, here he is admitting it, like on tape at Esalen, and it's like, well, he's doing a thing, but which we should acknowledge, that he's not quite admitting it. He's still playing with you a little bit, and so it's not going to convince like the masses that Terence McKenna was CIA. But the other thing is ascribing, like, it's a kind of like, these people are sick, you know, like that kind of idea of like Terence McKenna was kind of in on this the whole time, just like lying to everybody and like loving it, and like, you know, look what they did to all the deadheads, like look what the Grateful Dead did, like just promoting degeneracy and scum, like, you know, scumbag living and ruining ruining the lives of, which honestly, like, I think you could maybe make an argument for that maybe being a deadhead was not the healthiest life choice on the aggregate.
Probably not. Well, I guess it depends. I guess deadhead is a wide term, but I definitely think that taking a bunch of psychedelics and, like, you know, following around the Grateful Dead, I don't know. I mean, insofar as my own feelings can be generalized, that doesn't sound appealing. It sounds bad. I think if my friend asked me if that was a good idea, I'd say no.
For sure,
I would caution
yeah.
him against it.
So I mean, I kind of want to open. I maybe not to preemptively absolve all these people. Like by all accounts, like Timothy Leary was pretty much a huge asshole. Like his first wife committed suicide. Later, his daughter committed suicide. He was a philanderer, like a real charismatic, kind of just a con man. And I think all these people are kind of con men to a certain degree. But I wonder, is that kind of enough for this level of wackiness to like sustain itself? And for these people who are so open-minded that, as the old saying goes, their brains fall out, that they wouldn't kind of renounce their own philosophies at some point or make like a hard pivot away from it. And like none of them ended up kind of ever being that critical of psychedelics that they had promoted in the past. Like none of them had even done as much as like a Juicy J, like, I'm sorry, I rapped so much about like taking Xanax and like drinking lean at the same time. Like that was probably irresponsible. Like you'd never get any of that from Terrence McKenna or Tim Leary.
Yeah.
They basically were just like, it was awesome.
Like
no, they don't
like,
think that.
They wouldn't see like Juice WRLD or whatever die. Like even if they did see like the equivalent of Juice WRLD dying, like they wouldn't think that they wouldn't blame it on like the beautiful drugs that like caused civilization or whatever. They would still because ultimately they aren't really that open minded. They just like are like and I mean like their beliefs now aren't really like that unusual. Like a lot of like people obviously not anthropologists, like scientists, like anyone who actually like knows about like the development of like human civilization or whatever, but a lot of like lay people or people like in the popular discourse like are partial to like stone ape theory bullshit. Like I've heard people like float like that to me many times in my day-to-day life, like their ideas like, and they're very dogmatic about them, and like they clearly like are they may portray themselves as shamans, but they're like Terrence McKenna's not a shaman. He's completely self-absorbed, which I feel like is not what a shaman is supposed to be.
Very similar to similar to like Idris Shah, but even kind of
worse.
more extreme.
Honestly, worse.
More extreme than Idris Shah. Yeah.
Or like less of an authentic shaman almost. But like there is an interesting part in this where Robert Hunter gives his theory of like stage presentation, which I think is maybe relevant, to, of course, the Grateful Dead and everything. He says, stage presentation is a mix of attitude and metaphor, assuming that content is metaphoric. Attitude inclines an audience to acceptance or rejection of the metaphor. Never mind, quote, real. Real is some kind of breakdown in the process, a microphone on the fritz, a busted string, a fire in the theater. But the audience is very concerned with the metaphor of, quote, the real. They require a beginning, a middle, an end. Stage context, wow. Very condescending to the fans. Oh, there's foolish audience. Anyway, the audience is a feeling of multiplicity, although they are truly only multiples of one. Some mighty subtle alchemy in that set of circumstances. But the performer or band or corps de ballet is also only one, albeit a different one from the one of the audience. The presenter of the metaphor through the agency of attitude, as distinct from the receiver of the metaphor. A dissonance is created when a member of the audience decides to switch roles with the performer and draw the attention to himself. For a musical presenter, that would amount to catcalls, whereas a presenter such as yourself, one who encourages discussion, is involved in a more Byzantine interaction with the audience. From what you've told me, it sounds like you're often involved in situations where someone attempts to move the power of presentation from the stage of their own to their own seat. I would think that grasping the structure of the audience dynamic in a theoretical way, keeping that in mind along with the actual subject of discussion, would aid in retaining the modicum of control which leads the audience to adoption of the metaphor under discussion, hopefully enlightening them to the nature of metaphor as metaphor, rather than allowing the talk to degenerate into picking apart the metaphor itself. Obviously, every metaphor is vulnerable, and attitude has as much to do with defending it as does adroit argument. Theorizing on what an audience is one of my favorite on-the-road hobbies. It can be one sympathetic individual through whom you address the rest of the assembled persons, or it can be the self-projection of a hostile aggregate waiting for you to make one wrong move, then pounce, or you can see the crowd qua crowd. But one thing is certain. Both sides of the stage crave acceptance, the ground leading to a sense of mutual respect and unity of purpose, which is the desired outcome of performance art. You might even say, it's real. So, anyway, basically, this is all about, this is kind
This
of
sounds
about,
like it sounds like it sounds like Goebbels could have written that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's funny because it's kind of like, I guess Terrence McKenna is complaining about like going to academic conferences and stuff like that, and then people during Q&As asking him questions about like, and trying to like, because the way people always do in these Q&As, like trying to make it about themselves. And Terrence McKenna being annoyed and being like, they're ruining my metaphors or whatever. And so like then he's like, well, this is how I think about like controlling my audiences, or the audiences that I deal with. In order to make them like understand or enlighten them. So he does have some kind of like theory of this.
Well, it's also it reminds me of the intro to one of the like later episodes in Long Strange Trip, where it plays some interview audio with Jerry Garcia over like shots of like the crowd at one of these shows like in the 70s, and like how just like zonked out and like crazy, and they're all chanting like for the dead to come on. And he said something about how like the interaction with the crowd always creeped him out a little bit, and the adoration that they had for him felt like something that was reminiscent, frankly, of fascism. And, like he compared actually like the love that the Deadheads have and like their large like mass audience thing to actually it felt vaguely fascist to him and scary and like threatening. Like he was assuming some kind of power that had a dark element to it that I don't know, that maybe he was or was not fully read in on or something. But I mean, he did have that wall of sound, and it was pretty sophisticated for its time. And just to like slide in here, I think we could probably, I don't know, this guy, just to say, like, Augustus Owsley Stanley III, who is the creator of the Wall of Sound, who, much like J.P. Barlow, came from a, like, wealthy, kind of powerful political family. His grandfather, A. Owsley Stanley, was the governor of Kentucky, U.S. senator from Kentucky, and a congressman from Kentucky who, ironically, was like, or maybe not, was anti-prohibition in the 20s, but came from like a very old line, like Democrat, like probably Confederate, Southern family, and also like J.P. Barlow. It says rather cryptically here, at an early age, he committed himself to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. So here's another kid who ended up in a psychiatric hospital at that, as a young man. Who knows what happened? And I guess he went to the University of Virginia, but then he dropped out. And despite dropping out, he was able to pretty quickly get a job as a test engineer with Rocketdyne in Los Angeles, which was a military, military industrial manufacturer, and designing missiles. He actually worked on the SM-64 Navajo supersonic cruise missile, and then after working at Rocketdyne, which I feel like versions of that pop up a lot in Pynchon's work, or rip-offs of, I think Yo-Yo-Dyne is the one in Crying of Lot 49 that might be a riff on Rocketdyne, with actually that has weird electronic music elements. Like they go to a bar that people that Rocketdyne engineers go to, and they only allow like electronic music. But this is like in 1965, so it's kind of weird, right? Pynchon trying to tell us something here. Anyways, Owsley Stanley enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 1956 as an electronics specialist for 18 months. He worked at JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, and at Edwards Air Force Base Rocket Engine Test Facility. After that, he went to UC Berkeley and started manufacturing LSD, though I'm not sure exactly how he learned about it. But I guess he ran and like read a bunch of chemistry for 3 weeks and figured out, again, this is a part of the story that feels like, oh, really? He just magically like figured out how to make perfect LSD by himself, just as all the Sandoz supplies were running out with like Leary and Kesey and all these people. And then he went down to LA to work for like a TV station where he made like 300,000 hits, and then returned to the Bay. And in 1965, just in time for Ken Kesey's acid test, meets the Grateful Dead, and allegedly is one of the main suppliers of acid for the acid tests, and then goes on to produce something like 500,000 or a couple 100,000 more hits throughout the Summer of Love and etc. So he's somebody that was like had incredibly sophisticated background in like electronic warfare maybe and rocket engineering and things like that. It's again like it's bizarre that he also designed the very suspicious lightning bolt skull logo, like the main logo for the Grateful Dead, which some people have.
Same guy? Did he also design the bears? Yeah, okay.
I don't know, but
he was known as Bear Owsley. Yeah,
yes.
Right.
So I don't know if that was.
Yeah, he was the one who was like they're marching, which seemed like very much like like some New Orleans Bourbon Street, as mentioned in Truckin'.
Yes.
Kind of like cultic, weird, royal. Ritualistic, the king surrogation.
Yeah, and of course, like
stuff.
I think there's a couple things going on with the skull drawing. Where one, I mean, we'd be remiss if we did not point out that this is like a very rigid lightning bolt striking the skull of an individual that looks kind of like SSSSSSSSS, Schutzstaffel. So like Nazi roots and Nazi mind control during the war, Mengele and all that stuff, and also that the skull has a very big like Nephilim like skull on top of that if you look at it.
Yeah.
So or an ET skull, like a gray alien skull.
Yeah, it does kind of have that. Yeah, and there's also like the little jester that's a skull. The little skeleton jester. Yeah.
My time coming any day. Don't worry about me, no. Been so long I felt this way. In no hurry, no. Rainbows end down that highway where ocean breezes blow. My time coming, voices say, and they tell me where to go. Don't worry about me. Oh, no, don't worry about me, no. And I'm in no hurry. No, I know where to go. California, reaching on the burning shore. California, I'll be knocking on the golden door. Like an angel, standing in a shaft of light, rising up to paradise. I know I'm gonna shine. My time coming any day. Don't worry about me, no. It's gonna be
I mean, there's one more thing that I want to read. I mean, I don't know if you have any other stuff, but I do want to read like one like true straight up like Grateful Dead like folktale story because I just think this is too perfect.
Yeah, I think we
right.
can start to wrap up because I think we could go all day jamming just like the Dead, but I think we're at like 3 hours now, so like let's.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's definitely. All right.
No, we could do that. We could do this though. We'll split it into two. Probably.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think this is definitely and this is relevant. I think not only because it's a Grateful Dead folktale type, but I also Terrence McKenna and Robert Hunter in their What If Exchange, they're always talking about obviously shamanism, but they're both super interested in like ancient like Celtic or sort of insular culture and like the standing stones and everything. And this is a little story from it's in a book called Donegal Fairy Stories by Seamus McManus. So this is called The Snow, the Crow, and the Blood. And I think you'll pick up on some interesting stuff here. Okay, so this is as it's told in this book. One day in the dead of winter, when the snow lay like a linen tablecloth over the world, Jack, the King of Ireland's son, went out to shoot. He saw a crow, and he shot it, and it fell down on the snow. Jack went up to it, and he thought he never saw anything blacker than that crow, or redder than its blood, nor anything whiter than the snow around it. He said to himself, I'll never rest till I get a wife whose hair is as black as that crow, whose cheeks are as red as that blood, whose skin is as white as that snow. So he went home and told his father and mother this. He said he was going to set off before him and look for such a girl. The king and queen told Jack that it would be impossible ever to get a girl who would answer that description, and tried to persuade Jack from setting out, but Jack wouldn't be persuaded. He started off with his father's and his mother's blessing and 100 guineas, and that his father had given him in his pocket. He traveled away and away, very far, and about the middle of the day on the second day out, passing a graveyard, he saw a crowd there wrangling over a corpse. He went in and inquired what was the matter, and he found there were bailiffs wanting to seize the corpse for a debt of 100 guineas. Jack was sorry for the poor corpse, so he put his hand in his pocket, took out the 100 guineas, and paid them down, and then the friends of the corpse thanked him heartily and buried the body. The very same evening, Jack was overtaken by a little red man, who asked him where he was going. Says Jack, "I'm going in search of a wife." "Well," says the little red man, "such a handsome young fellow as you won't have to go very far." "Far enough," says Jack, "because the girl I want must have hair as black as the blackest crow, cheeks as red as the reddest blood, and skin as white as the whitest snow." "Then," said the little red man, "there's only one such woman in the world, and she is the Princess of the East. There's many a brave young man went there before you to court her, but none of them ever came back alive again. For life or for death," says Jack, "I'll never rest until I reach the Princess of the East and court her." So you guys can see how occultic this is. "Well," said the little red man, "you'll want a boy with you. Let me be your boy." "But I have no money to pay you," says Jack. "That will be all right," says the little red man. "I'll go with you." That night late they reached a great castle. "This castle," says the little red man, "is the castle of the giant of the Cloak of Darkness." "Oh," says Jack, "I've heard of that terrible giant. We'll pass on and look for somewhere else to stop." "No other place will stop than here," says the little red man, knocking at the gates. Jack was too brave to run away, so he stood by the little red man till a great and terrible giant came to the gates and opened them, and asked them what they wanted. "We want supper and a bed for the night," says the red fellow. "That's good," says the giant. "I want supper and bed too. I'll make my supper off you both and my bed on your bones." They also were discussing in Robert Hunter Times McKenna's exchange. They were talking about the story The Wendigo. Just as a relevance.
Oh, the Wendigo, yeah.
The Arthur Machen story.
Interesting.
I think Arthur Machen is the one who wrote it. But anyway, so the giant says he's gonna eat them. Then he let out a terrible laugh and made the hair stand up on poor Jack's head. But in a flash, the wee red fellow whips out his sword and struck out the giant, and the giant then pulled out his and struck out at the wee red man. Both of them fell to it hard and fast, and they fought a terrible fight for a long time. But in the end, the wee red man ran the giant through the heart and killed him. Then he took Jack in, and they spread for themselves a grand supper with the best of everything eatable and drinkable, and had a good sleep. And in the morning they started off, the wee red fellow taking with him the Cloak of Darkness belonging to the giant they had killed. They traveled on and on that day, and at night they reached another castle. "What castle is this?" says Jack. "This," says the wee red man, "is the castle of the giant of the Purse of Plenty." "Then," says Jack, "I've heard of that terrible giant. We'll push on and look for somewhere else to stop tonight." "Nowhere else than here we'll stop," says the wee red man. "No danger ever frightened me in all my life before, and it's too late to begin to learn fright now." And before Jack could say anything, he had knocked at the gates, and a giant with 2 heads came out roaring, and asked them what they wanted and what brought them there. "We don't want much," says the little red man, "only what every traveler expects, a sweet supper and a soft bed." "I want both myself too," says the giant, "and I'll make a sweet supper off you both and a soft bed of your bones." This is obviously having some threefold recursion here.
Yeah.
Then he laughed an awful laugh that shook the castle and made the hair stand up on poor Jack's head. The wee red man and he had a fight, and obviously he killed the giant, stabbing him in the heart. Then they ate, and he took with him the giant's Purse of Plenty. Okay. Next castle was the giant of the Sword of Light. So, Jack had heard of the giant and his awful sword, but the little red man, obviously he wasn't afraid. They asked for the same thing. He wanted bed for the night. "Ha ha," says the giant, laughing a terrible laugh. "I'll board myself on you two this night and bed me on your bones." He took out the terrible Sword of Light, whose flash traveled thrice round the world every time it was drawn, a lightning bolt. And whose lightest stroke killed any being, natural or enchanted. But that instant the little red man drew around him the Cloak of Darkness, so that he should disappear from the giant's eyes, and drawing his own sword he began whacking and hacking, hewing and cutting the giant, while the giant couldn't see him to strike him in return, and in 2 minutes the wee red man had run his sword through the giant's heart and killed him. He and Jack went into the castle, and they made a hearty supper and slept loudly in the softest beds they could get, and in the morning they went off again, the wee red man taking with him the Sword of Light. Having the purse of plenty, they could not want from this forward. So they went on their journey merrily. They traveled far and long until at length they came to the east, and pushed on for the castle of the princess. And when they came to where the princess lived, they took their horses, for they were now riding 2 beautiful steeds, to a blacksmith's forge and had them shod with gold. And when they had all the alchemy, all the metal, and when they had them shod, they rode up to the castle. By the wee red fellow's order, they didn't wait to knock at any gates, but put their golden spurs to their horses and leaped them over the castle walls. When the servants and soldiers saw the pair come bounding over the castle walls upon the horses shod with gold, they ran out in wonder. From the purse of plenty, the red fellow, as Jack's servant, pulled out handfuls and handfuls of silver and gold and scattered them among the crowd. Then the servants quickly brought word to the princess of the east of the beautiful and rich gentleman who had come, with his servant, to court her. They told her how they had both leaped the castle walls on horses shod with gold, and they threw away their gold in handfuls. She sent word for Jack to be brought to her, and when Jack came into her presence, he was enchanted with the look of her, for her hair was so black, her cheeks and lips were so red, and her skin was so white, he had never seen in all his life anyone so beautiful. I understand you have come to court me, said she. That I have, says Jack. Well, says she, to every one that comes to court me I give 3 tasks. If anyone performs the 3 tasks I will give him, he will win me. But if he fails any one of the 3, he will lose his head. Are you willing to try on such conditions? Says she. I'll try, says Jack, upon any conditions. She took him out into the garden of heads, and showed him 365 rose bushes, and for every flower there was a man's head on every one of the 364 of the bushes, all right? Remind you of anything? Maybe some other icon? Anyway, there's one bush without a flower yet, Jack, says she, but in less than 3 days I hope to see your head flowering in it. Then she took him to the castle again. Well, you guess he still wants to marry this girl, and treated him to a fine supper. She's Elizabeth Bathory, but anyway, when they had finished supper and drunk their wine and chatted, she got up to bid him good night. She took out of her hair a gold comb and showed it to him. Now, she says, I will wear that gold comb all night, and I'll spend this night from midnight to cockcrow, neither on the earth nor under the earth. Yet you must have that comb for me in the morning, and it must be taken from my head between midnight and cockcrow. Then she stuck the comb into her hair again and went off. Poor Jack acknowledged to himself that he had a task before him which he couldn't do. He wandered in the stairs and out into the castle and went meandering into the garden in low spirits. The wee red man soon came to him and asked him what was the matter. Oh, matter enough, says Jack, and commenced telling him all. Keep up your heart, says the wee red man, and I'll see what we can do for you. So the little red man went and got his cloak of darkness, and then watched till midnight outside the princess's door. Just 1 second before the stroke of midnight, the princess came out of her room with the golden comb in her hair and went off to hell. So she went in a bucket to hell.
Okay.
The little red man threw his cloak of darkness around him and followed her. She didn't stop till she came to hell. Where she went in, the little red man went in after her. The devil was very glad to see her, and he kissed her, and the two sat down side by side and began to chat. And as they couldn't see the wee red man for his cloak of darkness, he came up behind and snatched off the gold comb out of her hair and went off with it. And when he came to earth, he gave the comb to Jack. In the morning, when the Princess of the East appeared at breakfast, Jack handed her her gold comb across the table. She was furious, and the eyes of her flashed fire. I love that little Irishism there. The eyes of her flashed fire. That night she showed him a diamond ring on her finger, and she said she would not be on earth or under the earth till midnight and cockcrow, yet he must get that ring between those 2 times and have it for her in the morning. And when she went away, Jack went down to the garden and was wandering about there when the wee red man came up to him and asked him what was the matter. And he told the wee red man. Well, says the wee red man, I'll try what I can do. So he took his cloak of darkness and watched for her that night again. Just before midnight, she came out and went off. He followed her, and she didn't stop till she was in hell, where the devil was very glad to see her and kissed her, and they sat down side by side to chat. He snatched off her ring, etc., and then came the third, she was, tricked, or he got one up on her. But then she said, I will spend, all the time between midnight and cockcrow, neither under the earth nor on the earth, and I want you to have for me in the morning the lips that I shall have kissed while I have been away. Your head I'll surely have now, for the sword was never made by mortal man that can cut off those lips. Then she went away. Poor Jack, he wandered out in the garden, very downhearted at this, But of course the man came, and he reminded Jack that he had the Sword of Light, which was never made by mortal man. So he went down to hell. The devil welcomed her with a kiss, and as he did so, the little red man raised the Sword of Light and cut off his lips, and went off as fast as he could. So in the morning, Jack handed them across the table. So he gave her in the morning, across the breakfast table, I guess, the devil's severed lips, who was shaking with rage, and then he demanded her hand in marriage, and she had to consent.
Wow.
As soon as they were married, the little red man said to Jack, here you go, I have a wedding present for you. So he gave him 10 blackthorns and told him to break one of these blackthorns on his wife every morning for 10 mornings. And if he followed out his instructions faithfully, he would have a good wife on the 10th day. A little bit of a MK action happening there, but all right. Seeing the little red man had been such a good friend to him, Jack consented to do this. He broke a blackthorn over her every morning for 10 mornings, and for every blackthorn he broke on her, she was dispossessed of a devil. And on the 10th day, she had lost all her rage and all her fury and all the devils, and she was the best and most perfect girl, as well as the most beautiful one in all the world. I guess this actually is the key part, that what follows. The little red man, the 10th day, asked Jack if he remembered when he had set out on his travels, paying 100 guineas to get a corpse buried. Jack said he did. Then, said the little red man, it was I whom you buried, and I have tried to repay you a little. Now goodbye, and may you and your wife prosper ever after. The little red man disappeared, and Jack and his beautiful wife lived long and happily.
Wow.
So, yes, the little machine elf Claxton man was the Grateful Dead all along.
Wow. He was the Grateful Dead. And so...
Yes.
You know, the Grateful Dead, yeah, I mean, I guess that syncs with their portrayal of themselves, as people are kind of trying to help you on like this crazy cosmic trip. And
yeah, it was a crazy cosmic trip indeed. Yeah, I guess Terrence McKenna's reading of this would be that, like, you know, the original oral storytellers who came up with this were like tripping balls, man, and you know, they're like the druids, like or whatever.
Well, it's just like how I don't know. It's like how how did all the cultures that like didn't have access to mushrooms like come up with religion, or like how did
and
so
also
many
like another big thing is like how come all the cultures that like were tripping balls, like why were they doing human sacrifice and stuff? Like how is that? Well, you know, like harmonious.
Well, exactly,
and
like why? Like, you know, it's just like why were so many Soviet bands like making really dope psychedelic prog music in like the late '60s, early '70s, but like weren't having LSD orgies and like blowing up research facilities on college campuses or whatever. I mean, these things that we would categorize as psychedelic, it almost is a pernicious Western thing of like needing to ascribe it to a technology, in this case, an organic technology, you know, admittedly, but nonetheless like this kind of instrument, whereas like the human imagination seems to be capable of intense abstraction and quote trippy things.
Encountering, contemplating God. I mean, even John C. Lilly, I think, said, like, you know, after a while I realized that it was better to not do drugs. You know, I think that he might have gone down a K-hole that he could never come back from. But, like, I think that it's definitely, like, I mean, the Little Red Djinn and Satan can certainly appear to you whether you're high or not. And
100%.
I think that the like whole thing, it's like I don't know, it's cope for people who like love to do psychedelics. They like, you know, just like, yeah, man, like, and also like it has a double function to it. It's ironic because they want their ideas to be taken seriously, and like they want to like have their sort of ontological exploration taken seriously. But for a lot of people, the idea that like, you know, religious revelation or like religious experience is something that is tied to psychedelics or psychedelic drugs is like makes it like, you know, less real or puts it in a separate sphere.
It cheapens it. It cheapens it if everybody can do it.
Yeah.
If everybody can have an ecstatic vision of machine elves or talk to the Archangel Gabriel or something, then it's not quite as special as when it happens without things like. I mean, is not the nature of a miracle kind of the absence of like the mechanism by which it occurs, which makes it miraculous?
Yeah.
Like instead you know.
Yeah, I mean, it takes us back to like the sort of Sufi like stories, like Kushairi stories, like these very common ideas, like you know, or you know, he transmitted them. You know, they're have a, you know, they have its nads, but the you know, the idea that like the miracles themselves that appear, like they might in fact be like veils. You know, they might have some kind of aspect of like actually distracting from the real like spiritual significance of like a person's state. And I think that the illusion of spirituality that some people achieve through some of these drugs is like exactly that. You know, the idea that there could be a ruse of God, you know, a miracle that's given to you as a test or something. I think that a lot of the time these drugs can be like that, where they give you the sense of having this greater spiritual enlightenment, but actually, like, that is like a screen that you need to pass beyond. That's like, you know, something to say like,
well,
it's
sort of,
it's like you did it. You realized we're all gods. Congratulations. Yeah, exactly. Shaitan.
Well,
telling
Shaitan,
you, like,
he's the adversary. That's what he.
Yeah.
That's what he's there for, is to psyop you. So that you know it's real. And of course, yeah. I mean, I think you open yourself up to kind of getting psyoped if you live this lifestyle of, you know, torquing it up to 11 and entering the spirit realm with that, which is something that older cultures did with much more caution, instead of just taking it the way you would take, you know, a dexedrine pill or something like that, whatever you do in the 60s. You know, this sort of is on another order of, like, they're right that it is a kind of more complex kind of drug that, you know, does have very intriguing psychological, you know, causes very interesting psychological reactions and insights and stuff like that. But to sort of, you know, give it the, you know, this is the expressway ticket to enlightenment or
this
or
is
to
why
religious
we even
ecstasy,
have religion or consciousness at all, is because like a caveman took a mushroom or whatever. It's like ridiculous, you know.
I feel like if that was true, we would still be cavemen, because we'd all be freaking out and being hunted by jinn and, you know, doing human sacrifices. I don't know.
Engage in constant battle with two-headed giants, you know, that to try to retrieve the Sword of Light.
So the kids they dance and shake their bones, and the politicians throwing stones, singing ashes, ashes all fall down. South and white comes north. You know, the world full of petty wars, singing I got mine and you got yours. And the current fashion set the pace. Lose yourself, fall out of grace. Turn the page. Be the rich man in his summer home, singing just me well enough alone. But his pants are down, his cup is blowing, and the politicians throwing stones. So the kids they dance and shake their bones, 'cause it's all too clear we're on our own, singing ashes, ashes all fall down. Picture a bright blue ball just spinning, spinning free. It's dizzy with possibilities. Ashes, ashes all fall down.
You know, it is interesting how like the symbology, like whether, I mean, they might have some awareness of it, but it is interesting how like it recurs. And I do think that like I do think that like the, you know, DMT is produced like in certain natural quantities, and I don't necessarily think that there isn't some kind of ontological. Yeah, exactly. And when you die, and I do think that there is some kind of like there is very likely some kind of ontological reality that isn't often afforded to some of those experiences that they have. Like I do think that there's also aspects of it that are deceptive. But, you know, and it can't just be fully taken at face value at all. But,
100%.
yeah, there's mysterious aspects to it, but, yeah.
I mean, and you know, yeah, and also, you know, the assumption that somehow that the Enlightenment or taking this takes you out of the realm of the political is something that not saying that. I mean, I think to whatever extent there was a kind of, you know, like the Weather Underground tried to create a sort of a praxis out of like doing LSD and like urban Maoist insurgency and like Marxist Leninist Maoist insurgency tactics didn't really end up working very well, and but at the same time I think just, you know, if you're going to step into this heady space taking LSD and then claim that you and then follow this movement which doesn't want to be political or change the world. It's a kind of the supreme irony that it really was for dropping out, you know, becoming a deadhead, becoming really into this thing was like dropping out from society. And I guess maybe early on there was a feeling that, I don't even know if there was a feeling early on that this would lead to a sort of qualitative change in the culture, though I think it, in a more broad sense, it did change the culture in terms of how we interface with like fandom and rock stars as kind of cult icons, or, you know, just pop stars in general as pop icons and stuff. You know, I think that the Grateful Dead probably blazed some trails that like the scientists who created K-pop probably, you know, found very useful. And I'm being like half joking when I say that. But yeah, this whole, I think we could put to rest the idea that there was something kind of inherently, I don't know, culturally, socially, politically progressive. Oh, I think before we get out of there, maybe the main reason why, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but we really have to, is that, you know, going back to the beginning of Hank Harrison talking about how there's always a bohemian culture in San Francisco. Oh, of course, that might make you think of the Bohemian Grove Club that was founded in the late 19th century by people like Mark Twain and some of the rich robber barons in the city. Well, wouldn't you know it, two members of the Grateful Dead, Bob Weir and Mickey Hart, are card-carrying members of Bohemian Grove now. And I guess have been for like 15 to 20 years. Groovy, man. And so that actually did get, I will give the Deadhead community like a little bit of credit for basically saying, like, I looked on, there's an interview where he's either talking about his friendship for his admiration for Obama, Bob Weir is, and like the top comment is like quote, like, voting for the lesser of two evils is still evil, Jerry Garcia. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of I think maybe it's wishful thinking a little bit, but I think there's a lot of like pure-hearted deadheads that feel like the Dead have kind of betrayed that detached hippie purity that, you know, Jerry Garcia was a big champion of, but then he died in the 90s, so now the rest are kind of becoming they're cheapening themselves with you know, this thing. I'm trying to see here what Bob Weir, he told kind of a sus anecdote that somebody asked him during an interview, like, what's up with you and Mickey going to Bohemian Grove? And he relayed a story where he said, you know, he's just knocking back a few with General Wild Bill Quinn, who was a top OSS officer in World War II. It was actually the guy that Hermann Goering chose to surrender to at the end of the war. Then he became the former chief of operations for the CIA very early on. He led a, I guess, sort of commando regiment called the Buffaloes during the Korean War. He became the chief of information at the Defense Department and was deputy director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, 1962 to 64, was the vice president of Martin Marietta, the aerospace manufacturer, until 1972, and commanding general of the 7th Army in West Germany in the mid-60s, and is a member of Bohemian Grove, one of the top line, like, OSS old heads. And he was just talking, you know, it was just groovy to, like, hang out with this old dude and, like, have a few drinks, and, like, a whole crowd gathered around us, man, and we were just, like, talking about all kinds of things and stuff, and, like, you know, you gotta get people, like, you gotta open up minds, like, wherever you can. He said some just not very convincing, and kind of like, you know, he also said he hadn't been present for any virginal sacrifices, and everybody laughed. You know, he had kind of hung a lampshade on it, and you know, I guess in a different interview, he talked about how like playing for a Barack Obama benefit like reunited the dead. And he said that he's visited the White House many times. He said, quote, "I go there and I do business. I feel like I belong there." And then it was like, I mean, I feel like, you know, we all belong there, right? Because it's like the people's house. But like, I definitely feel like I belong there. It's just like, I don't know, Bob Weir. Like, he seems like the most sellouty, rich hippie. I mean, he always was kind of a rich kid, but he seems the most kind of, if anybody like literally is like in the acolyte robes at the Bohemian Grove, I feel like it would be maybe Bob Weir. I mean, there is that video which anybody can look up that maybe I'll put out in the closing music, the Bucket to Hell song, which was part of the suite of music videos they released in the late 80s for their In the Dark album, which has a very creepy cover where it's like versions of them, but they all look like ETs. They look like the ET alien, right?
Yeah.
I remember seeing it years ago.
Like literal ET.
Like, yeah, like creeped me out. It really fucking creeped me out. But it's got some, it has their like quote unquote political song where throwing stones, where a bunch of children kind of start throwing watercolored balloons at like this Wendigo monster that is graffitied on a big mural on the wall. And it's kind of funny that, like you said, I think earlier, that they call it like the most political. It's just kind of like politicians are like saying lies, and you know, it's like not really
exactly.
like, I think maybe there's something about saving the earth or something.
Whether you believe in green or proletarian gray, like it's just, you know, all a sham or something like that. It's like stupid. Like,
which I wonder if he was at the Grove by then.
Yeah, like it just gave me the idea that like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, everyone in like the Soviet Union wears like gray jumpsuits or like, you know, like what?
Exactly.
Like,
not groovy, man.
Stupid.
Not groovy. Even though they had they had so many psychedelic bands that I'm completely confident going on record, if we're just talking about like big jam bands that play psychedelic type experimental rock, I would pick at least like a half a dozen Soviet bands. Or you know, I probably could find a dozen bands from across the Eastern Bloc that would blow the fucking Grateful Dead out of the water. Like on a sort of sonic level, like 100%. Like it's weird but I feel like if I ran into Bob Weir today and I told him about, you know, Skaldowie in Poland, like he would have never heard of them, or unless his handler like briefed him and were like, you need to make this type of music first and then like make everybody do LSD or something like that. I don't know. It's just very weird that like honestly, that's so embedded in the cultural imagination.
Anything. Like, I really don't like the Grateful Dead. I would rather. It's
actually kind of, I'm sorry, it's kind of an insult to a lot of the 70s bands because they had a lot more sweep and like precision and drama and ideas they were working with than just kind of like trucking. Yeah, we're trucking. Doing cocaine and then we're trucking.
Yeah, I mean, I do like music that has like poetic, like, you know, lyrics you can like reflect on or, you know, something like that. And I like, you know, sophisticated like instrumental music, but like I feel like the Grateful Dead is like the worst of both worlds. Like the lyrics
really
are like inane, and like the music like is just like jingle jangle, like I don't know, like.
A lot of it really is.
Sorry, everyone out there who loves the Grateful Dead. Like, you know, I mean, I'm a Philistine. I admit, like, I have terrible taste in music, but I stand by what I said. Like, it's jingle jangle.
I will say they're not. They don't grate on me nearly as hard as Fish, who are another people that I feel like they inherited.
Yeah,
I feel like they inherited. I feel like they inherited the op. So like now they're going around, and I know I knew people in college that were like Fish heads and stuff, and like that's something I've talked about. It's like a kind of a meme that like, oh yeah, people that like love Fish, like it's just I don't get it. I literally don't get it, and like, you know, everyone, I guess the old saying was like, hey man, you ready to get hooked? I have a friend who had a friend who was a Fish head who brought him, and all kinds of, you know, he was brought to a Fish show. It was like his first time, and that was like a phrase in the Fish community where they would do this kind of put their finger in their cheek like they're getting fish hooked and be like, hey man, you ready to get hooked?
That's cool.
Yeah, I always thought Fish like they are totally devoid of any like even symbolic weird occulty content. I think the Grateful Dead has some songs that are better than Jingle Jangle, but I think that the studio versions are the best. Sorry, like I don't care. Like you need to play on time if you're a drummer. You know what? Try like being a lead vocalist in the best-selling rock band in American history, and also staying on time, like Don Henley did. Deadheads, like you know, he was able to do it. Why aren't you? Maybe like you know, cut out the nitrous gas or whatever the fuck. But no, I think, I mean, they were like a good, if you think about them in the context of Jefferson Airplane and kind of those like groovy psychedelic bands, like I think there's 60s stuff, there's some good, you know, trippy blues rock, there's some good like 70s stuff, even their 80s album. The Hell in a Basket is like a corny track, but the video, I was telling you that it kind of felt like a perfect blend of Kenneth Anger and Smuggler's Blues in terms of like what was going, because there's like guys in devil costumes jumping around, and like but Bob Weir is dressed like Glenn Fry in like a Miami Vice outfit, and there's like a dominatrix, and it's, you know, it's definitely spooky, but has that kind of like, we're just having a fun time, like kind of thing. But, you know, say if I'm going to hell in a bucket or something, or is it Hell in a Basket? I forget. But at least he's having a good time.
Well, Hell in a Handbasket is the phrase, but Hell in a Bucket, I think, is the song.
Okay, yeah. If he's going to Hell in a Bucket, at least he's having a good time. So that's where our culture and our society is going, to Hell in a Bucket, thanks to the Grateful Dead a little bit.
When the snakes come marching in. All very, very cool. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is like, that's the thing. Like, I think that is a trap, but I feel like we talk about it some other day where like the whole like archaicizing aspect where it's like, oh, it's apolitical because we're like spiritual, you know, but of course like these two things are always like very heavily entangled, and one has to like navigate them. Like the idea that like spirituality is somehow tied to the past, and therefore like, you know, it transcends like the petty politics of modernity. Like, you know, no, like there's still politics, like, you know, in like pre-modern societies. Like if you have like the king and queen of Ireland, like they, you know, in this sort of fantastical fairy tale sense, like it's hard to pick up on, but they're in real life, you know, they might be embedded in like lots of spiritual paradigms and like deal with spirituality, but in a very political way at the time, you know. But you know, so
these guys just feel they're not very interested in that. They're not interested in political economy. They hate like collectivization or collectivism of any kind. They're still fundamentally like highly anti-communist, which is like, you know, really the biggest red line in 1960s America. That if you were, you know, no matter how outlaw you were, if you're like a neo-Nazi, like LSD dealing biker, you're not that much outside of this. I mean, I take them at their word that they're right, that they are a deeply American band, and that's not necessarily a compliment, you know, like in a sense of like they're desperados, they're like settler colonialists of your imagination and your soul. Like that's kind of in a way and that's what the internet and Silicon Valley have ended up doing. Like they are the settler colonialists of your like imagination, of your mind, and the Grateful Dead are like your mind, body, and soul, the whole thing. But they're still approaching it from this kind of attitude of like both like libertarian kind of like Homestead Act kind of plot your piece of land and don't tread on me, and that kind of thing, and also maybe a kind of manifest destiny of like we need to go to the stars and link up with our AI machine elf gods and live and transfer our consciousness to computers, which Tim Leary was really all about at the end of his life.
The great event must happen. And like
same old narratives
all
coming
the
up.
Philosophy that they propound, like now it is like it is completely the new status quo, where like I actually read this just like one last thing. I read this you know, a little bit of this book, you know, very theory heavy, but it's called I came across it because it mentions Grateful Dead. It's called I'm Not Like Everybody Else, Biopolitics, Neoliberalism, and American Popular Music by Jeffrey Nealon. And he even had a chapter in his book called Steal Your Face, where he talks about this 1967 special report from CBS that was called The Hippie Temptation, and it was about the growing youth menace in San Francisco. And he used the Grateful Dead as his main example, and he said, the interviewer asked the Dead what they hope to accomplish by non-participation in mainstream social life as we know it. Why not get with disciplinary society, get a job, get married, start a family, grow up, damn it? Various members of the Dead replied by insisting they don't want to accomplish anything. They just want to live free from interference by the man, which will of course later become the mass individualizing mantra of biopolitics. As Reasoner, who's the host of the program, notes, the hippies exemplified by the Dead, quote, do not want the existing disciplinary identities, worker, family member, citizen, soldier, that, quote, our civilization offers them, quote, except on their own terms. They recognize the immense problems of society, but their remedy is to withdraw into private satisfactions, which Reasoner concludes is, quote, the greatest waste of all. Then the author, Nealon, says, the whole thing is pretty funny in retrospect, but what's most peculiar about the hippie temptation is that its tone and demeanor, disciplinary power wagging its fingers at people who only want to be left alone to self-actualize, looks like something completely foreign to the American present, even though it was only a half-century ago. If nothing else, watching the show today makes it crystal clear that the hippies, and their biopolitical sense that all revolution starts with and moves through the revolution of the individual, won the American culture war decisively. In the neoliberal world of radical just-do-it individualism, all but gone are the imperatives of Reasoner's disciplinary world, where we're supposed to sit down, shut up, and do our jobs for the greater glory of society. Even the U.S. military, which would seem the last bastion of this kind of disciplinary thinking, sells itself these days as a biopolitical self-actualization technique. An army of one.
That is fire. That is real fire right there. I think that gets to it. Was this the real acid test to boil away whatever residual instincts or attitudes of collectivism existed in American culture at the time, to sort of reformulate, also in a society of the spectacle way, to alienate everybody and then bring us back together, but through a mediated thing, so that we're all kind of alone together.
They were actually better at capitalism, or having an ethos that was well adapted to the at least neoliberal regime that we currently exist in.
Absolutely. And that's even joked about ironically, is that they were such good businessmen at building a brand, even though they did it their way. All the record people were like, come on, make a hit record, and they went out and built this sort of cult following, literally a cult following, and pushed their memes out there, just the images of the bears and the skull and all these things, where it in a way mattered less about the actual content of what they were selling than it was the idea of something, a certain idea of individualism that they were or individualists, radical individualists kind of united. It's like a Libertarian Party convention, the fucking Grateful Dead show, and how it was prophetic in a way.
Yeah, and the irony of it is now we don't have a choice but to exist in under this paradigm where the ultimate imperative is to be yourself and actualize yourself and explore your own that's what is ironically kind of forced upon us, is the idea of supreme individual self-actualization, spiritual exploration
it's
paradigm.
The neolib hell that we all that we all know about,
the tyranny of choice. Yes.
Those live, laugh, love, do you follow your bliss, all this kind of psyop-y culture stuff that is
this is
absolutely
a much more
pervasive.
eloquent. This is a much more eloquent way of saying what I was just saying, that Nealon says. In a biopolitical society, however, subjectivity as norm-busting transgression is the norm and rule, so the contemporary function of authenticity discourse, musical or otherwise, is largely left to push against an open door.
An endlessly open door, just open that door in your mind until your brain falls out.
But we still got all this fake, we're rebelling against this, thing that is now not really operative, the whole idea of this disciplinary norms. Now the disciplinary norms are just do it,
I'm just actually as a funny kind of end note here, I was up in the Bay Area a week ago, and I went to like kind of a nice the little coffee shop that was open. It looked pretty new, and just to show kind of the influence of like in the Bay Area, the epicenter of all this, of where it's at today. There was like a wall filled with like stock like positivity phrases. Like the wall is decorated with just these like blocks of let's see, the giving of love is an education in itself. We shall never know all the good that a simple smile can do. Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Real education should consist of drawing the goodness and the best out of our own students. What better books can there be than the Book of Humanity? Virtue is bold, and goodness never fearful. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Strive not to be a success. Oh, this is the creepiest one, and I think maybe we'll end here. Strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value.
Cool.
So it's like
that's
literally
still probably better than the lyrics to Blues for Allah, but
you're right. Or U.S. Blues.
Anyway.
You notice that he kind of, one of the lines in that is like, I'm gonna share your wealth. I'm gonna drink your health, share your wealth, run your life, and steal your wife. So he's basically saying what Alec Jones is saying of like, you got the communists taking over, kid. They're gonna be they're gonna shoot you in the back of the head and like make your daughters like dig ditches in the fields. Basically they're gonna steal they're gonna steal your wife. They're gonna kill you. They're gonna share your wealth. Ew. Given that this is like in the tail end of the Vietnam War and they released this album during Watergate and stuff, it's just like that kind of ironic detachment that we've criticized in other, mediums before, that the Grateful Dead really were the lead jesters of this ironic posture towards the man, as it were. How far does that really take you? And did it really do anything beyond like prepare the ground for neoliberalism to absolutely pervade every aspect of our lives?
Yeah.
And that's why Al Franken and Tucker Carlson both love the Grateful Dead. And,
yes.
Everybody in the neolib reality prison that we're in, that is really the real revolution they pulled off. That is the cultural revolution that they won. Except I don't know if they knew what side they were fighting for, or as Timothy Leary said, I like the CIA.
Well, yeah, I don't know if the CIA necessarily even had like a vision of this, like when they were doing like if they had like a whole plan where this was like the end goal. But I think that they definitely got what they wanted, even if it was like an experimental project. I think that it was still a success.
Relatively low investment. Well, probably not low investment for all of MK Ultra, but at least letting the Grateful Dead, not get busted. And that's that's the most simple thing of them kind of being like some kind of op or like protected, is like at any point if the government, if they posed any kind of threat to like the Nixon administration, which was in power for a very long time, or the Reagan administration, which is super hardcore about drugs, don't you think they could have just like thrown any of the Grateful Dead guys in jail? They were obviously driving around the country distributing, or at least, bringing drug trafficking with them everywhere they went. There was even, I think, I don't know how apocryphal this is, but I do remember like hearing somewhere that there was a huge LSD drought when Jerry Garcia died in the mid-90s. Like in the early 90s, it had been having like a resurgence, and then because I think the Dead shows stopped, so the circulation in the economy of LSD, I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it kind of came back eventually, but it's it was so driven by them, and yet they never got really like thrown in jail or pressured by the feds. They were kind of just allowed to like go do their own thing, run their little acid test festivals out all around the country. You would have thought that some of these right-wing regimes, especially some of these right-wing administrations, would have thought, let's just like put an end to these Grateful Dead assholes. We don't like them unless, maybe they were doing God's work or doing Shaitan's work in some indirect way. Yeah. Well, I think like we'll circle back to some of these characters later. I think a Terrence McKenna deep dive would be fascinating. I suspect he's another agent. Tim Leary, I think there's some. I'm curious about what his post getting MK'd at Vacaville kind of obsession with like UFOs and solid state intelligence, if you will, kind of was. There was I didn't get to talk about his. Well, I think actually part 2, because I think we should. This is a certain kind of series. I think we'll get back to those people at some point. They'll pop up again, but I think maybe the next installment.
The Claxton men is ongoing.
We'll bracket that for now, but I think maybe the point of this of this little like series, kind of like the Contra series, is to like try to dissect like what really happened with like 60s culture and rock and roll. Like to what extent I think. I'm personally sold that like a lot of it was constructed and managed by like shadowy intelligence forces and et cetera, et cetera. But like to what nature, I think it's still interesting and kind of maybe vaguely defined. Like to what extent, what was the reach of it? How, everybody wants to know, like, is my favorite, I love David Bowie. Like, was he working for MI6? Probably. But so I think the next time we're gonna take a drive down the 101 freeway down El Camino Real, the road to reality, and we're gonna go where Timothy Leary bragged in 1979 when people ask him where did the LSD revolution really get going. He said, the one place that never gets talked about that was pretty groovy because they were so low key about it was the Los Angeles scene. He said, our cells that were operating in Los Angeles in the 1960s were doing more far out stuff and doing it more below the radar and haven't gotten as much credit, but he felt that they were more significant. He said they had more doctors, they had more scientists, they had more stuff going on. And I think he doesn't spell it out in that video that he's referring to what was going on in Laurel Canyon in the 1960s, where so many of the pop stars, folk stars, rock stars that kicked off the psychedelic vibes of the swinging 60s really did come out like literally out of nowhere. And that's something that Dave McGowan did a lot of heroic work in uncovering. But I think that'll be next time, because that'll flesh out the full picture of like what was going on in California with this. Is this the building of the Trojan horse that would like bring neoliberalism and techno-fascism to basically the mainstream and like hippie pill the entire society, even if they thought they hated hippies or loved hippies. It didn't really matter because we're all living in the paradigm, like you said, today. It's ubiquitous. Or you can be in Long Island and there's deadheads. You could be in the South and there's deadheads. And
smiley faces, tie dye, like all it's just boomer, generic boomer, stuff just pervades everything at this point.
And the stuff that they didn't mercilessly crush. Yeah, well done, done. Whatever sub-project,
I'm sure that they're all
this.
receiving a Medal of Honor from a contingent of Claxton men and like a big Jabba the Hutt type slug being at the Bohemian Grove for their service.
Yeah. I just as a final thing, I did have that idea where you think of Jabba Hutt. Like, this is a subject for another episode. Do you think it's possible that Jin could work for the CIA? Or that the CIA is working for Jin?
Possibly with them. I think it's possible.
I mean, kind of like the mafia, like a little bit of a kind of a transactional relationship in certain matters. I don't know. Food for thought. If we're gonna be,
we're just it's possible.
We're just jamming here. This episode is like a Grateful Dead song. We're just going.
Exactly. Just jamming, just riffing.
We're just jamming.
Exactly.
I don't even remember what episode we're on anymore. That's how free it is.
Well, always stay on 33. But
always.
Anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
Gotta stay on 33 degrees. But
gotta stay 33 all the time.
Keep it 33. Yeah.
Keep it 33.
Yeah. But I thought you were gonna ask, like, do you think that like George Lucas just like, you know, was inspired in his design of Jabba the Hutt by like a real Jinn being that he saw like in some kind of DMT trip, because
Well,
that's like what I was thinking.
He's
That's
not
it for the
unconnected.
Star Wars.
He's
episode
not
that we do.
unconnected to this whole world. He's not
certainly
unconnected
not.
to this whole
He's certainly
scene.
not unconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think-
I don't know. Yeah, the chicken or the egg with the Jabba the Hutt sighting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think we're at 4 hours now, so I think we have a
Oh
nice,
my God.
a nice clean 2 hour.
Yeah.
dead
All right.
episode.
Great. Okay.
We covered a lot, but
Yeah.
we will. You know, I guess stay trippy. Don't trust the man.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just don't.
Yeah. Watch out for the great event, the novelty theory, the time wave.
Skip philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just keep trucking in your own reality tunnel.
Just keep trucking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just keep slugging through your reality tunnel with your Jabba tail. Yeah. Trust the plan. Trust the Claxtons. Etc.
That's all for now. But
yeah.
Grateful Dead, very sus, and
Extremely sus.
Yeah. So
If you see
vigilant.
a corpse, yeah.
Yeah. If
give
you
it
see a
couple-
corpse, just
If the bailiffs are trying to arrest the corpse on 100 guinea debt, you should maybe pay for it. But that doesn't mean that you have to like the band.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
All right. Until next time, dear listeners, keep your feet on the ground and stay vigilant.
Well, I was drinking last night with a biker, and I showed him a picture of you. I said, pal, get to know her, you'll like her. Seemed like the least I could do. 'Cause when he's charging his chopper, up and down your carpeted hall, you'll think me by contrast quite proper. Never mind, I stumble and fall. Never mind, I stumble and fall. You imagine me sipping champagne from your brew, or a taste of your elegant pie. I may be going to hell in a bucket, babe, but at least I'm enjoying the ride. At least I'm enjoying the ride. Yeah, at least I'm enjoying the ride. Yeah, yeah. I'm this sweet little sock or pretender. Somehow